Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now with a very special guest in the corner here. She's actually decided to put herself in a position where she could pose a little. But yeah, I didn't know if I wanted to stream today. I've asked you guys like on Twitter and in the YouTube community section. Of course, there's terrible things happening in Israel and Palestine. So I know that most people have been captivated by that news, as have I. I've barely slept yesterday as I've been like frantically checking the news. What is the result of all that? But I decided to still stream. We can talk tech, we can talk some fun stuff, we can all try to calm down. All to relax a bit, and I think this is partially why I'm also trying to build this community. Obviously, I want to help others, but I also want to help myself. It's a good hobby to have when it comes to communicating with other people, getting feedback, getting questions, all that jazz basically. Today we are going back to Linus, who recently did a first impression video on the iPhone 15 Pro for their short circuit channel. Let me just briefly make sure that my stream is working fine. We have 4 people watching. That's fantastic. Very quickly people are joining. I hope I'm doing the stream at a somewhat like nice timing for you, I guess. Yeah, beyond that, I can always just encourage you guys to subscribe, like, share if you actually enjoy the content. If you want to participate live, the live chat is obviously open to all of you. I don't discriminate between members and non-members. Of course, if you want to support me directly, you can either find the Patreon link in the description of my channel, or you can send super chats, super stickers, stuff like that. It's always very much appreciated. Now, why am I doing this Linus video? Well, yesterday, some of you might have seen, I actually tried to do a stream that was entitled My iPhone 15 Pro Max Review After a Week, and it was a decent stream. I was really not in the mood, I didn't have the energy, I was a little too distracted, and then my internet went haywire, both my Wi-Fi at home and my 5G hotspot from my iPad, so I decided to not fully finish it, and since I don't leave unfinished videos on this channel, I basically deleted it. I didn't even wait for YouTube to fully process it once the connection was like re-established and stuff for a second. So today I decided to do something similar, but in a different format, which means that I will be listening to what Linus has to say. Again, the only thing I know of this video is that it's called Son, I am disappointed, and it shows like Linus having like a bad report card in one hand, and in the other hand he holds like the iPhone 15 Pro. So that like invoked some interest in me, I guess one could say. However, overall, from what I understand, what I saw in the comments briefly, it seems like the video is actually mostly positive. So I decided to watch the video with you, react to it, and to each point that he talks about, I will tell you my own experiences after a week with my iPhone 15 Pro Max and now running iOS 17.1 Beta 2, which is basically almost equivalent to 17.03 for the most part as far as I understand. So if you have any questions, not just to Linus, but to my impressions of the 15 Pro Max, how it compares to my previous 13 Pro Max, I am obviously open to answering those questions. So without further ado, I'll start. As always, please let me know if the audio works well for you, if basically it's all well balanced, like how loud I am versus how loud Linus can get, and of course if there are any problems with the stream. I know OBS with its media source thing can sometimes really screw up. Without further ado, let's get started.
No. After being one of the first iPhones to excite me in years, the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max are absolutely mired in controversy right now. Everything from overheating to Apple providing weird advice regarding charging cables to even a new bend gate.
Yeah, of course, I've addressed all those issues on the channel. I don't know if he actually believes that all of those are consistent issues. Like, bandgate is probably the one that has been most comprehensively addressed by actually being tested in a somewhat scientific way. The overheating stuff has been already addressed with a software release, which also seems to help along a little bit with battery life. And then what was the other point that he mentioned? Like bandgate, I cannot scroll back because it's OBS. I guess my short-term memory isn't as good as I remembered it being. He brought up the bandgate. Oh, and the other one was like Apple giving like weird cable recommendations. That was supposedly from one Chinese Apple store, probably really bad faith people. And quite honestly, from the screenshots that were mostly posted, you cannot even fully tell that it's an actual Apple store. Like, everybody can use like a certain like, you know, like image for their messenger and stuff like that. Again, not to say that there is no fraud happening sometimes through Apple stores. It's extremely rare though. Like, I assume that for every like Apple related fraud, you'll probably be like defrauded 10 times through regular stores that obviously don't have Apple's like all-seeing eye on top of them. Also in China, it's like you really don't want to be caught by the CCP doing something like this.
But that doesn't mean that I don't still want to check them out. So let's take...
Yeah, why wouldn't you? For one, it's your job. Second, you really not gonna address the issues?
Take a look at not just the phones, but also this fun little report card that the labs team put together for me. Right out of the gate, boy, are they ever pretty. And the beauty is more than just skin deep. They feature an aluminum titanium hybrid frame. We'll get into that a little.
Nope, not true. It's a titanium frame. The internal structure of the phone is not really usually considered a frame. I know the aluminum is then like smelt together with the titanium to a degree, but it's not really a hybrid. Like, everything you touch on the outside is either titanium grade 5 or glass on the back or in the front, which is the ceramic shield. So yeah, I guess you could put it that way, but why is my question?
A bit more later. A 6.7 or 6.1 inch display, depending on whether you go for the Pro or the Pro Max. Apple's new A17 Pro, no longer Bionic chipset, featuring 2 performance cores, 4 efficiency cores, and 6 GPU cores, along with 8 gigs of LPDDR5 memory and all the wireless fixins. Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.3, NFC, and their ultra-wideband chip that has some cool new tricks up its sleeve, like the ability to find your friends just like you can find an Apple AirTag in a crowd of people.
No, that's not the point of the ultra-wideband 2 chip. Yes, device-to-device, like phone-to-phone communication, or basically location through UWB is now a feature, but primarily it's also about range. UWB is like their second-generation ultra-wideband chip allows, I believe, for like 4 times the distance, stuff like that. So again, not fully correct, Linus.
That is legitimately pretty useful if you have friends. Of course, for the folks whose best friends are their dogs or their cars, there's the cameras. Each has...
Wait, you can also put AirTags and other phones on the car or in the dog. It's a little expensive, I guess, if we are talking about phones, not AirTags.
A 48 megapixel main shooter, along with 2 12 megapixel auxiliary shooters. One ultra wide and...
Yeah, I guess you could call them auxiliary. Like, yeah, I guess I do call like the wide camera mostly the main camera, but I wouldn't call the others auxiliary. It's just... I guess technically, I don't know why I have such a problem with Linus's wording choice this time around. I guess I just really don't trust him after all that happened.
One telephoto. That telephoto is 5x optical zoom on the Pro Max and 3x on the regular Pro. For the avid photographers, I could see that being enough, especially when you combine that with some of the new software-enabled capabilities, like the ability to record log raw footage even to an external storage device via the all-new 10 gigabit.
By the way, we now have a couple of people watching. Please consider letting me know if the audio works well for you, if the stream is fine. I know OBS shows me like 0 lost frames, good connectivity and stuff like that, but I just really want to make sure that all is well.
Per second USB-C port, the ability to take a regular photo and then convert it to portrait after the fact, so you don't have to make the decision at the time.
I don't actually think this would work for the specific image that he chose, but okay.
And the ability to record spatial video for viewing on the upcoming Apple Vision Pro headset.
Coming later in the
There's,
software
of course,
update.
some other physical things. In addition to that USB-C port, we get our usual volume buttons and, okay, I am legitimately so excited about this, and it should just be on everything, the action button. Gone is the toggle switch for vibrate and ring mode, and here is the action button. Just click it to see what mode you're in, and hold it if you want to switch between ring and silent. Or, if you're not into that, you can reconfigure it to just about anything you want. I have no idea how to do this. Let's see how quickly I can figure it out. It's not here for some reason, although that would be fairly obvious to me.
Linus has like this weird approach to things. He's like, I will test something like with how I consider it should be done, right? And if it's not done this way, then it does mean it's not intuitive. It's like, dude, of course you go to settings first. Like, come on. Like, even if it were in Control Center, likely you would need to put it into Control Center through, like, also, like, Control Center is mostly an overlay. It will not give you, like, all those detailed options in the same comprehensive way. Maybe it would be a good toggle to put into Control Center, maybe with like 3 or 4 presets that you move quickly through. Not actually a bad idea, but it reminds me a little bit of like the T9 dialing situation, right? Where Linus is like, oh, I expect it to be done this way, I expect to get this option. It's like, I know we as consumers have the right to demand stuff, but we as consumers also have to understand that sometimes what is on the menu is what we are gonna get. We can choose from the menu, but ultimately once we get it, we can customize it a little, but it's not like if I like order specifically like the salmon dish, right? Like the really good restaurants will not convert that to tuna or to steak just because you ask. They likely will have some option with tuna or steak if you really want to, but if they have a specific dish that they believe works with like their special lemon sauce and something like that, yeah, then you're getting it with salmon. Like, it's the same thing here. It's not even uncustomizable. It's not even the old Apple conundrum of like, why doesn't Apple let me customize this? It's literally just the customization button is not right where he expected to find it. Come on, Linus.
Nope. I guess we need to dig into the old-fashioned settings app. Alright, well that wasn't that hard to find. Ooh.
Yeah, it was like 0 hard to find, bro.
Ooh, configurability. Choose a shortcut. This is so much more robust already than what I've seen with things like the stupid Bixby button.
Yep, that's true. By the way, that's absolutely true. I know Android is known for having the ability to like enforce basically a lot of options onto the OS, onto the hardware that you have. But when it comes to actually pre-built customization that is actually really robust, really well designed, I actually have to say, ever since like iOS 14, Apple has been a little bit on a roll. And when you add like even like older features like different focus modes that don't have even an equivalent on Android, it's kind of hard to complain these days about lack of customization on iPhones.
Extremely difficult when they first introduced it to just do whatever the crap I want with it. Okay, this is an example. Even things like the double press the lock button to open the camera functionality that's on some Android phones. the lack of configurability for that kind of thing, this puts it to shame.
There is a triple power button thing on the iPhone that you can customize. It's unfortunately not a separate action button, right? It's not as robust. You get like 12 options. They are mostly focused on certain accessibility stuff. There's no way to like invoke the camera from what I understand. So technically you could even have one extra button, and quite honestly, I don't know if it will take like iOS 17.2 or maybe we'll have to wait until like iOS 18, but we desperately need a double click option on the action button. I have said it before, I understand why it's not there. The idea is obviously on the volume buttons, if you click them several times, right, you expect the volume to go up or down. So this is why you actually would click them several times. Now the problem with the action button is it sits so close to those volume up and down buttons that you might misclick it, right? This is why a single click on the volume buttons will change the volume just a little. On the action button, a simple click will do nothing. This is why Apple mandates it be a press. With a double click, right, the volume buttons do a little more than with one click. The action button does nothing, so it doesn't get confused, similar in the way that it could be confused by a single click. My argument is that the double click is still motorically so different from a single click that quite honestly, what are you losing here, right? You get a second functionality on the action button potentially, and all you give up is the fact that you at some point might accidentally double click it, which could invoke it if you didn't want to, if you instead wanted to do volume up twice, or you wanted to do the action button but then instead you double click the volume up button. There is no real loss here. Like, what are you mapping to the secondary functionality of the action button here that would be so unseemly that it couldn't happen to you in public or something like that? No, like Apple, give us double click on the action button, then it would be perfect. Imagine all the extra buttons you have. You have like also the triple click, right, for some accessibility stuff, okay, on the power button. Then you would have the long press as the main button on the action button. Then you would have a double click for extra functionality, and then on the back of the device you have a double click and a triple click for further customization, for further shortcuts, which this is insane. This is like 5 extra functions. This is at least 4 different shortcut options to implement that would make the iPhone instantly the most customizable phone ever. Right now it's still like on par maybe with some other Android devices in that regard, given that you can customize the other buttons they have. But yeah, overall the iPhone absolute win for customization here. Absolutely great how Apple has taken their historic distrust of customization to a whole new level by reversing it basically, and by giving people great built-in options that are well tested, well integrated with third-party app functionality, as shortcuts is now supported by more and more apps. We now also have a lot more just like interactive stuff, like interactive widgets in iOS 17. So while of course it's still not quite Android, in my opinion iPhone has come a long way, and I really appreciate it.
Note recognize music. Man, can you configure it though to use it in different ways? Press, hold, double press.
No.
That would be next level. Oh, accessibility features. In some cases, that's just Apple's way of saying features that you
extra stuff. Yes.
You won't admit are a good idea, like the mouse.
No, I disagree. I think there is a profound difference in how Apple approaches accessibility, not by actually thinking that it's secondary or that it's unimportant, but fundamentally the functionality of accessibility features is mostly designed to help you out. It's not features that are fully well developed that you could universally use throughout the OS without ever hitting like a roadblock. So for example, when we first got like mouse functionality through accessibility, it's like called cursor, right? It looked different. It was not as comprehensive as the cursor functionality is these days with iPadOS. It was absolutely incomparable to, for example, to also like the beautiful animations that Apple has created for once keyboard and mouse support was official for the iPad. So yeah, no, I know what he wants to say, but it's not entirely the truth.
They added on the iPad as an accessibility feature forever, and then we're like,
no, this is, by the way, this what you see now is not how accessibility cursor support worked. Not at all.
fine, it's a good idea. Quick camera launching on the iPhone, yes! Look, no, I know from the lock screen. I know you can do this. I know. Okay, watch this. Watch. Okay, quick draw. I press the action button. Oh, the camera's open already. I'm ready.
Okay, I guess I'll get to this as my first review point. This is exactly how I use the action button on my iPhone. I've mapped it to camera. I've tried to make this like a little catchphrase, I guess, on Twitter for when like websites like 95Mac or Mac Rumors post like guides to how to best customize the action button. I just respond, just put it on camera. It works extremely fast, extremely reliable. I wish again the button was larger and or positioned in a different place. However, I have also explained in previous videos why of course it's where it's currently at, right? It's because this is where the space was and iPhones are very intricately designed. The only real alternative would be for them to finally get rid of the SIM card and then replace the place there with extra button stuff and a little bit more battery. Wouldn't it be awesome to finally get rid of the SIM card tray? The SIM card tray where literally nothing sits inside with the US iPhones, right? I got a chat in like my last video where somebody said, don't you know that E in eSIM just stands for embedded? Like kind of suggesting that there's like a SIM inside. It's like, dude, no, it's on the chip. Or on the motherboard, however Android devices handle it. It's like, no, you don't need an actual like physical space that is significantly large in any meaningful way. You don't need anything equivalent to the current SIM card tray inside the iPhones. Like, we are not even talking about like nano SIMs. No. We are talking about basically ones and zeros at this point.
Snap. Oh, I like it. I gotta be honest with you guys. So far, I still kind of love it. It's amazing how used to giant phones I've gotten, though. The Pro Max doesn't even feel unreasonably big. I think
it's now over. It's like 10 grams lighter, right, or something like that, than the S23 Ultra. It's less wide, from what I understand. And it has like those nicely, slightly like chamfered, not chamfered edges, but it's like slightly, ever so slightly curved. It feels phenomenal to the touch. Absolutely. It's by far my favorite big phone. Can be absolutely honest, like the 13 and 14 Pro Max were not my favorite big phones when it comes to how they handle. They were a tad too heavy and a tad too large. Especially the 13 Pro Max, since it technically had ever so slightly larger bezels than even the 14 Pro. This, now thanks to the slimmer bezels, which again to me is not an aesthetic argument, I don't really care how thin the bezels are, but it makes the phone less wide, and that switch to titanium and some other redesigns make the phone lighter, so I really don't have anything to complain about. I probably could say that instead of like a 19 gram reduction, they probably could have gotten away with like a 12 gram weight reduction and then used the other like extra 7 grams in comparison to what we got for like a little larger battery maybe, or my personal preference for more cooling on top of the A17 Pro and the X70 modem, which get really hot when they work together. But overall, I'm still incredibly happy with what he has brought up with the design and the action button.
this is probably the route I'd go, though for gamers, that might not actually be the best option. You see, both of them have the same 460 ppi pixel density. Both of them will run at anywhere from 10 to 120 hertz with
Nope, 1 to 120 hertz. It probably won't go like that low ever in real usage, but it's 1 hertz for the always on display.
Adaptive refresh rate technology, so they'll feel smooth when they need to feel smooth and can save power when they need to save power. But because the size of the screen of the Pro Max is so much greater, we actually found in our game testing that our 1% lows were significantly lower, meaning that in periods of
you can tune the settings on really demanding apps. Metal Effects upscaling is coming to smartphones. I wouldn't like. Also, the 15 Pro will get still hotter than the 15 Pro Max, so even if top performance might be better on the 15 Pro, I would wager that sustained performance probably is not better than on the Pro Max. So no, I wouldn't put too much into this. I'm sorry.
You could experience significantly lower dips, which could result in you getting killed. I mean, not in real life in the game, but you get the point, right? The brightness of these screens is flippin' outstanding. Okay, in SDR, we got 250 nits full screen in a dark room.
Okay, that's actually not bad findings. It's pretty close to what GSM Arena found. GSM Arena is the one website that I really trust when it comes to brightness testing. I think they're really good at testing actual, SDR brightness, full screen brightness that you're actually gonna use outdoors. Like, so many websites just copy and paste the HDR brightness claims. For example, the Galaxy S23 Ultra claims a peak brightness of 1750 nits, but that 1750 nits is HDR brightness. It's by no means outdoor brightness. And if Samsung claims that it's outdoor brightness, that they're downright lying, because there's no reputable website that shows the Galaxy S23 Ultra delivering over 1250 or around 1300 nits of full, 70%, I guess, full screen outdoor brightness. Not in auto mode, not in manual mode, nothing. The iPhone gets to 1600 nits in HDR, and Apple clearly labels it as such, but the outdoor max brightness in auto mode is 2000 nits, and in fact in tests you can find it go up to around 1780 or 1812 nits or something like that, which again is so close to 2000 that it can be testing differences. We have our first major comment of today. YouTube Kulanichizi. The labs are the first people I've seen that measured 1% loss in a mobile game on a smartphone, which is interesting to see. I guess now that Apple has their own built-in FPS measuring tools. I guess this is how they got it. I actually didn't think about it. It's actually true. Like, most mobile games probably don't have built-in benchmarks that would support that. Kind of would be interesting to see how it pans out. Once we get the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 next year, how 1% loss perform. There's a big thing that many people don't really understand with especially mobile SoCs, but the CPU difference is so fucking large between Apple and Android. 1% loss could be significantly higher potentially on Apple, given just how good their CPU is. So games are significantly less likely to ever be CPU bound. So the only bottleneck on the iPhone would conceivably be the GPU bandwidth and stuff like that. While on Android, you also could have the chance that the CPU from time to time says I'm not good enough right now. Maybe the phone is a little hot because the GPU already runs at 6 watts. So maybe activating the X3 core to full 3.2 gigahertz is not really an option right now. And then you get a micro stutter that actually doesn't matter that much in average frame rates. It will be interesting to see. Again, I do wish we got more tests in general for smartphones and Apple Silicon Max. Unfortunately, that's not quite how the industry works. Most still focus mostly, of course, on laptops, desktops. But given how important smartphones are becoming in so many ways, I actually think it's exciting to see that.
1,000 nits outdoors, and in an 18% window, we got 2,200 nits in SDR. 2,200 nits on a phone? Are you flipping kidding me?
And it's the same panel as last year even, so the excitement I guess is coming from Linus not understanding how good the 14 Pro was.
HDR, we didn't see the same kinds of stratospheric highs, but these are...
No, on HDR, Apple maxes it out at 1600 nits because when it comes to color reproduction, you will get lesser accuracy if you really go overboard with like extreme brightness and stuff like that. That does not mean that obviously higher brightness HDR is always worse. Apple has adjusted their own HDR capabilities upwards over the years, but I would argue most people probably don't need anything significantly higher than the 1600 nits that Apple advertises, just for battery reasons. Like, imagine you check out HDR content and because it's always super duper bright, your battery dies, right?
Really, really impressive displays. For me, the gaming story of the iPhone 15 family, though, is not mobile games like this. It's the AAA games that they were showing off during the announcement.
Did they get something to test?
Actually get developers porting their games to Metal for the iPhone. It could be...
By the way, I think, for one, let me add, I guess, some of my own impressions to what he is finding. I have found that my 15 Pro Max performs significantly better than my 13 Pro Max when it comes to display brightness. It also doesn't get as hot while using at a similar brightness level. It also doesn't get as hot while using 5G. In fact, I had to use a lot of 5G with my iPhone in a way I didn't have to use on my 13 Pro Max when it originally came out, because as you guys know, for now I'm staying with my mom, which means that I'm using her crappy Wi-Fi, unfortunately. This is why these streams are being brought to you by the 5G hotspot from my iPad Pro. Yeah, in terms of gaming testing, I've tested Genshin Impact a little bit, but I've tested pretty much a lot of COD Mobile, and it has worked extremely well. Yes, I got dimming when I tested it at a hot day with 5G outside, but it still was completely usable, completely responsive, very, very like responsive, not just in the sense that obviously everything was happening, but it got like a solid 60 FPS still. So yeah, I'm very happy with the performance of the 15 Pro Max. In terms of CPU, there's nothing close. In terms of neural engine, it's hard to say how good like the new Google Pixels will stack up. And then in terms of GPU, you can technically match the raw GPU performance with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. However, you get way inferior ray tracing. I don't know if the Snapdragon chip has hardware-based mesh shading support. I know that through software, both like Mobile, Vulkan, and Metal have already supported it even before the architectural redesign, but this is the first like where the shaders are actually built for mesh, not just compute. And Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 has absolutely no equivalent to MetalFX upscaling, which now uses not only just like FSR, like built-in algorithms, but actually the neural engine performance basically being machine learning accelerated. So quite honestly, if you really care about like sustained performance, just get a little like one of those Razer cooling accessories, and then you're golden with this phone. Because some might say, well, why wouldn't I get like a gaming phone? Well, for one, you do not get quite the same performance as on the iPhone. You do not get the same next gen features in neural engine based MetalFX upscaling and the fastest ray tracing on a smartphone, nor do you get what I would consider probably like the best speakers on a smartphone right now, and one of the best displays bar none. It probably will take comprehensively like the S24 Ultra to actually beat it, and like Google currently claims like very high brightness levels. I'll be interested in what actual tests show. I will definitely be reacting to Pixel 8 reviews once they actually start coming out. And then the other point is that Apple has Apple Arcade, which in my opinion opinion, is the best thing that has happened to mobile gaming in a long time. And then the new thing that will be happening to mobile gaming that is even better is now the incoming wave of AAA games. And of course, on top of all of that, you still get the fact that even perfectly optimized games between Android and iOS still are usually a little more perfect on iOS, given that iOS users spend more money than Android users on average, which it also, like, you get a ton of adoption for the latest gen, like, high-end devices, which you usually don't get as aggressively on Android. So you usually get slightly better optimized apps on Apple hardware anyway. Yeah, so there's a lot, honestly speaking, for the performance of this phone.
Literal game changer. Since I've been gaming for so long, now seems like as good a time as any to talk about the first big controversy, thermals. While we didn't extensively test for thermals, we did perform game benchmarking, so we did make some observations. Our devices got as high as 43 degrees on the surface, which is...
Oh god, I hate surface testing, because surface testing tells honestly nothing. Like, I don't know how much you guys are, like, tuned into, like, the PlayStation news cycle, but, like, when Evans something, I guess, I don't remember the guy's name, like, this a big YouTuber tested, like, the thermals of the upgraded PlayStation, right, which had, like, PlayStation 5, which had, like, technically less cooling inside, but it was very much reorganized, so it was, like, a little closer to the SoC, maybe better for the memory and stuff like that. And he tested, like, the heat output on the back of the device, and he was like, oh, this gets hotter, so this means it's worse. That's absolutely not how heat works. Like, sometimes you will have, like, a very, like, high area heat dissipation. This is usually the best thing you can do, where you cool passively, right? Because passively is heavily impacted by a larger area. However, once you get active cooling involved, then how you push out the heat through, like, a fan, well, that heavily still becomes, like, impacted by the area that you push the air through. It does not actually mean that maybe the SoC is hotter or anything like that. So saying how hot the device is honestly not really scientific. And the only reason why we do that is because we don't have great insights into like on-chip thermals with mobile devices the same way we have, for example, for an Intel or an AMD chip, or even an Apple Silicon chip on a Mac, right? For example, I can open you now TG Fan Pro, right? And I can tell you that the temperature on my performance course is between 58 and 60 degrees Celsius, and my efficiency cores are around 58 to 59 degrees Celsius, right? I can tell you that because Apple opens up that data to developers who want to know. So yeah, overall, it's not like I don't understand the value. Obviously, the hotter a phone gets, the more likely it is to get heat soaked, the more likely it needs to throttle down to not get even hotter. But it's not as scientific as when you have real on-chip data or on motherboard data.
Is not particularly comfortable, but isn't going to do any kind of harm, while we've seen reports of as high as 46. Our best guess is that it's one of a couple of things. Either those other outlets were charging while performing their testing and therefore adding some additional thermal load to the device, or there could be some variance depending on whether these phones were made in China, where the factories have more...
No, it was a software bug, Linus. That's way too much over-analysis. I'm sorry.
...experience, or made in India. So here's a fun little thing you can do. If you look at the box, you will see blah, 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 assembled in China, something, something. Yes, right there. But if you look inside the USB-C port, there's a little engraving that indicates if you got a China or an India unit. So one of our theories, and this may impact some of the other controversies as well, is that there could be some slight differences, whether they're at the factory or whether they're up the supply chain, that are causing these phones to be slightly different. So my iPhone 15 Pro Max that I ordered on launch day is China. our iPhone 15, which the team has already checked, is a China.
This is what you really do when you really didn't actually do enough testing for real review, and then you start just spewing nonsense. Somebody had to like research that. Jesus Christ.
Model. And my iPhone 15 Pro is also China, so I wonder if there's a little bit better consistency.
I don't even know. Are the Pros also already produced in China? From what I understand, it was only the non-Pro models. Not that it really matters, like it's done in pretty much the same like quality controls. And if you actually had like defective cooling attachment to the chip, you likely would likely result in real overheating. Like it wouldn't really result in just your phone getting a little hot. So unless you are making the point that they maybe just put in a tad too little like thermal paste, I don't know. It's a weird point to focus on. Clearly this was made before the software fix, so okay, I'll leave it at that. What bothers me is rather the use of the word overheating than the surface temperature. Yeah, surface temperature measurements are not the same as overheating. People are obfuscating the meaning of the word a lot. A device can literally be overheating. Exactly. And sometimes overheating is even perfectly normal. Like if you test it in 40 degrees Celsius, even the best thermally managed phone, because at some point the heat soak will just happen, right? If you're consistently generating around like 5 to 6 watts, like let's say you're taking like 8K 30 on an Android, right? But you're using it in 40 degrees Celsius or something, which I guess would be like, what, 110 degrees Fahrenheit? Like, yeah, that phone will have to overheat for a second, and which means it will then have to throttle down or even shut down to cool off. Overheating is not the same as the surface area getting a little hot. Overheating actually results in meaningful performance loss, meaningful stability loss, or to the point of the device having to shut off or actually sometimes completely breaking without feeling hot to the touch because the device is unable to get internal heat. Yeah, getting hot by itself is a sign of heat dissipation. For example, this is why it's bad, why the iPhone only gets hot on one side but not really on the other. It gets hot right where the motherboard is, but if it actually had a significant like vapor chamber heatsink and it had like heat pipes that dissipated the heat towards the other side of the phone, then it would get evenly hot on the entire surface. Now overall that would mean that the heat builds up a little slower, but at peak performance that would probably result in exactly the same peak temperatures. They just would have built up over slower periods of time, and your chip would be less likely to throttle because it was able to have more heat dissipation area, which means it has more area to heat soak before the heat starts to be too much for the chip to handle and it has to throttle down. By the way, guys, we have 6 people watching, which I really didn't expect. I know it's been a couple of hard days for many people. Please leave a like, please leave a comment if you enjoy the content, and if you want to support me directly, as I've pointed out, Patreon is in the description to my channel, or if you want to support me directly right here, right now, you can do so with a super chat or a super sticker.
In these China models, whew, you can just immediately tell shot on iPhone looks better.
Yep,
Sorry,
videography is not comparable.
People, gotta give credit where it's due. Now let's
I guess I can use that as like a lead up to what I would say. I don't take that many videos. It's just that when I take videos, I usually care a lot, right? Usually it has to do with like my nieces or some really important get-togethers with friends, stuff like that. This is why I really care about video quality, even though I don't take that many videos. So my point here is that, yeah, the iPhone is absolutely king when it comes to videography. Smart HDR5 from photography is not quite the same difference maker for videos, but that's because it's honestly not needed, because videos already were best in class, while photos in certain like direct sunlight scenarios where there's a lot of contrast could be crappy on previous generation iPhones. That has also been fixed, but yeah, videos were fantastic and are now phenomenal, I guess. Yeah, You're saying it's exhaust when it's like getting rid of heat. Yeah, I guess. Did I not use the word even once? Yeah, I know the word.
But the second big controversy, fragility. Apple spent a fair bit of time talking about the titanium frame, and that sounds really impressive. But in Zach from Jerry Rig Everything's bend test, he actually found that it failed extremely quickly. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that I think will just happen sitting in your pocket like we saw with, what was it, the iPhone 6, I think?
Yeah, we saw that on like, what, 13 devices, I believe, was the overall count?
It should be noted that for Zach, the regular Pro, the non-Max, didn't have any noticeable bending problems. Another thing that happened was Apple Track had the camera bump break off during a drop test.
Yeah, this can happen. I'm sorry, guys, to tell you, but smartphones are not built for like military use without a case or something like that. They're not designed to be shot, and sometimes when you drop them on like really hard asphalt or something like that, believe me, sometimes the angle will just be just right for something to pop off, for something to break. Personally, I've put them like in my pocket with keys, and neither the front nor the back did scratch. I will not be doing any stupid drop tests on my phone. I'm using it currently without a front cover, like a protection glass, but I'm using it currently still with a fine woven case, which is more than enough protection for now. And I'll probably be switching to like a Pitaka case. Quite honestly, I know a lot of people want to rock phones without cases these days. Like, I guess you could make the argument, well, the back glass is now 2.5 times cheaper than before to replace. Guys, just put on a freaking case, find something that looks nice. Believe me, you'll be so thankful if you eventually drop your phone and you don't end up with any scuffs, you don't end up with any breakage. It's such a no-brainer to me that I honestly don't know why we always have this discussion. I think anybody who just goes without a case just accept the risks, which I'm fine, but please don't pretend like you have some scientific way to know that you just bought a phone that will survive a drop. I'm sorry, smartphones are not that good, and as long as they're just metal and glass sandwiches, they will not be better. There are limitations to physics. I'm sorry.
Labs' theory is that the camera module could be introducing a weak point due to the way that the glass curves up from the main body, or the flex in the subframe.
Yeah, also this was one result.
That pushes against the inside of the glass during a drop. The break in the glass is perfectly aligned with the inner frame. Enough about controversy, let's talk good things for a little bit.
And I mean, like, there's like zero, like, fucks given to like, actual, like, more scientific testing that didn't replicate any of those results. Like, they put like 100 pounds of force on the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. They put it into a 1 meter fall against like hard material inside in like this little circular thing. It's like, yeah, that was actual testing. With Zach, yeah, sometimes you get unlucky, and sometimes it's I have acknowledged that probably the back glass in the 15 Pro might be a little more brittle than the last gen. Who knows? Maybe Apple focused a little more on scratch resistance. Maybe it's happening, as I said before, because the titanium is like harder than a stainless steel. It doesn't absorb a shock, but instead it just pushes it further onto the glass, which then results in the glass more easily breaking because it doesn't share the impact with the titanium. Again, it's just one theory. It doesn't really matter. I have addressed all those controversies. I've been super neutral and unbiased when it comes to addressing it. So to me, bringing them up without actual fact checks for Linus at this point just feels disingenuous, so I really don't appreciate it.
Both of these managed to achieve 85% charge in just an hour, and that's in spite of the fact that Apple does not support wildly fast charging rates, 60 watts, 100 and plus watts, or whatever else like some Android manufacturers do. And they both reached 100% in just over an hour and a half. By contrast, the iPhone 15 non-Pro took over 2 hours to reach 100%, but it should be noted, also reaches 85% in 1 hour. So it seems to be just down to the curve that Apple has chosen.
Yeah, Apple is extremely lazy, I guess you could say. After 80%, it just adds like a percent sometimes in 10 minutes, I guess. It's not always clear. Sometimes it's a little faster, sometimes it's a little lower. I guess the point that Apple wants to make, and this is why they're now offering that software option, is 80% is the best thing for battery health. So you can now even lock it down to never charge basically above 80%.
For topping up the last 15% of the battery. Another good thing, the USB-C port. They've actually given me a little bucket.
I guess I can talk about my battery life findings. I've already talked about them to a degree, which is the battery in my iPhone lasts about as much as my 13 Pro Max did at its peak when using Wi-Fi. It's better when using 5G. And it's better in more demanding scenarios. So yes, I wouldn't call it a game changer over the 13 Pro Max or the 14 Pro Max, but it's still pretty much objectively the longest lasting phone out there that isn't a 6,000 milliampere hour phone or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, so I really cannot complain. Charging speeds are appropriately fast in my opinion. Maybe I wish they could be a little faster, just between 20 and like 50%, so they could really, so they could get up to 50 a lot quicker, which might get me like through the rest of the day, and I wouldn't have to wait as long. So I guess I would look forward to like maybe 45 watts of charging. But overall, I'm extremely happy, and the fact that of course it's now USB-C, which is compatible with my chargers for my iPad Pro. It's compatible to every non-MagSafe charger, of course, on my MacBook, and it's still compatible with my Belkin MagSafe that attaches to the back of the phone that I had for my 13 Pro, and also works with my AirPods Pro. The only outlier here is the Apple Watch that needs its own puck, but thankfully that puck also supports the AirPods, so at least it's not a cable for just one device.
Of fun things to attach to the new iPhones. Let's start with a microphone. Wait, did I even mention that dbrand sponsored this video yet? There's no broken glass this time, right? Nope, no broken glass, just iPhone cases. We've all seen cases like this in the past. They start out clear, they end up yellow, junk. dbrand's new Ghost case is designed to never yellow. Wow, never is a really big word. Did they use the word never? dbrand seems quite confident they have engineered the case to solve that problem. So much so, in fact,
I have to say, I have the clear case from Apple for my 13 Pro Max. I've had it since basically month 1.5. I bought it, I believe. No, I actually bought it first. I got the Pitaka case a little later. And it's not yellow in the slightest. Maybe I'll show it to you in like a month once I'm actually back home in Berlin.
That dbrand is offering free replacements in the event that your Ghost case ever turns yellow. This looks absolutely sick. Considering all the torture that they've put me through over the years, I'm kind of hoping they do turn yellow and cause a huge headache. That must be from our sponsorship team. Yeah, pretty much. No, I don't hope they turn yellow, because I actually believe in dbrand's approach to product design. I think that they overall do a pretty darn fine job, and I'm really excited to no longer see ugly yellow plastic phone cases.
Those were mostly more like silicone cases, right? Like, I know they're transparent and all, and I had like one like that for my iPad 2 back in the day, and it got like yellow as piss. But yeah, I wouldn't really say that all transparent cases these days become yellow. Like maybe like if you use them a lot in the direct sun, and maybe this wouldn't happen to this one specifically. but overall I wouldn't worry about it that much. My argument here is that it's your recent phone with a recent clear case is unlikely the case will yellow before you actually might want to upgrade the phone or get rid of the phone for some other reason. At that point you would need a new case anyway, because it's extremely rare these days that you can reuse a case from one gen to the next, and it's pretty much never the case that you can reuse a case for like 3 or 4 gen upgrade. That just ain't happening, sorry.
Because when that happens, people inevitably throw them away and we end up just producing more garbage. It's better to produce...
But they will throw cases away because those phones will at some point not be in circulation. Like, yes, the phones last long, but believe me, nobody will like go out and run out and find some used clear case from dbrand like with their ancient phone. At that point they're likely to just use it without the case, I believe. Yeah, so no, I don't think this has such a strong environmental impact. I guess I would say the cases in general have a strong environmental impact. I guess I'm saying this doesn't necessarily reduce it, because again, you would still get a new case most likely with a new phone.
Some plastic thing once rather than over and over again, and this looks...
But you will have to...
So I'll be keeping...
Again, this is what happens when you have like sponsor bias, right? When you're covering an issue that concerns a sponsor and you know it better, but you clearly don't go out of your way. Like, what is your argument? I guess best case scenarios, you can sell your iPhone to somebody else after like 3 or 4 years or whenever you upgrade with that case. Okay, I guess that's a thing, but at that point, most cases don't break objectively after 3 or 4 years. Most non-clear cases don't yellow. Like leather objectively probably becomes more pretty after 4 or 5 years. So sure, it might drop and then it also gets scuffed, and that isn't pretty either. But to pretend that this is such a big win for the environment, it's like, that just comes from non-nuanced thinking. I'm sorry, Linus.
On the phone while we test out all these cool USB-C peripherals. What do you think are the odds this microphone is just going to work? I don't think so.
Okay, no pre-watch, right? I think microphones generally now work well in iOS 17. Don't they?
There's no way. No. No!
Yeah. Good.
Holy crap. It just worked. It just worked. Volume control just working? Is that just the headphone volume control?
Yeah, does it? I guess you can mostly regulate like what your microphone records anyway from the microphone. I don't know if it changes like the actual like system volume the way that a piece of a headphone does.
That's wild. You could just plug this into your iPhone and be recording audio. Oh, we definitely need a Razer Viper 8.
Okay, it does not work. Okay, my theory here. It does not work the way it does on iPadOS, but from what I believe, and that's because I actually was in the touch settings recently, in the accessibility section of the settings app, is the iPhone still has cursor support for accessibility features. So if you are like motorically impaired and maybe you have your iPhone like positioned in front of you and you really want to do everything with your mouse, I believe it works. I believe it will be like this weird circle in a circle, right? I don't know how customizable that is, but I believe it will work. Our sponsor dbrand is wrong, but I can't say they're wrong because they give us money. Shit. I guess, right? It's like it's a nuanced wrong, right? It's a point that I can accept, right? Similarly to how I can accept that if you use a fine woven case for the same amount of time as a leather case, it probably has a smaller environmental impact than a leather case. However, my argument against fine woven is because, well, I personally like actually how it feels, but I would say that because fine woven does not quite meet the high quality criteria that people usually associate with Apple. So people are likely to get a second case. I myself am likely to get a second case. And the other point is it does feel a little less durable than leather in the long run. So it probably will result in you having to get a second case before you get rid of the smartphone. At that point, its environmental impact likely being the same or even larger than one singular leather case that could have more likely survived that entire time. Again, this is highly speculative, but Apple is not immune from criticism from me. I will criticize Apple on the same grounds as I criticize any other company. I am a consumer. Of course, I favor pro-environmental acts. This is, for example, why I've been saying, if Apple wants to ship me an iPhone in a fugly gray box where only the iPhone sits, don't waste paper on instruction manuals inside. Don't even give me cables, because I'm likely going to get myself 3-meter cables and Thunderbolt cables anyway, and you aren't shipping those. Like, don't ship me 20-watt chargers. I'm swimming in chargers anyway. I'm not swimming in chargers anymore. I've given many of my chargers away, so I'm kind of in a peculiar situation where I might have to buy new chargers at this point, which is weird, but all my chargers have gone to good hands. People use them. People are very happy with them. So yeah, for example, in this case, I'm all for Apple shipping us less crap. But if you're shipping us like the same volumetric amount, I kind of expect it to still be long-lasting, durable. So if you ship me a case that is worse than the last one for the same amount of money, I will criticize you, even if it's technically on some level better for the environment. Guys, we are now an hour into the streaming. I want to say thank you so much. If you're enjoying the video, please like it, share it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed yet. We are now at over 6.3k subscribers. That's absolutely insane. I want to keep growing this community. I know most of you watch my videos afterwards, but we now get more and more viewers also in live streams, which I'm really appreciative of. And if you're really enjoying it and want to support me directly, please consider either supporting me through Patreon. You can find the link to my Patreon site in my channel description, where you can also find how to follow me on Twitter, or you can send me a super chat or a super sticker.
Okay, gaming mouse though. Does iOS support a mouse? I know iPad OS does, which is a totally different thing. Okay. Oh, no way! I'm a keyboard mouse gamer, folks.
Oh, he actually turned it on.
Right, because Apple arbitrarily decides that, well, iPads need to be locked in landscape mode. iPhones simply don't. What if I do? Apple is apparently warning that using third-party USB-C cables could cause damage to the device.
By the way, this is true. I don't know if in the beginning of the video he meant that like there was like this Twitter thing with some kind of Chinese store complaining about third-party USB-C cables. That is 100% correct. It's better these days than it used to be. But remember when in the 2016, 2017 era, right, when most Android phones started, high-end Android phones started getting USB-C, with the MacBook 12-inch being actually the precursor to that, being like the first real mass-market USB-C device. Like the situation was so bad that Google had like a list of like verified like accessories that you should buy rather than others, because phones were overheating, some were potentially burning up, like some were not charging at all, some cables had like zero data transfer capabilities inside, even though some of them claimed to do. We had like really cheap like knockoffs and stuff like that, which isn't even really knockoff, it's just a bad product that pretends to be better than it is. So Apple's still giving you a warning and saying that, yeah, if you're getting maybe a cable that people have shown works well with like an iPad or a Mac, it will work most likely also better with the iPhone, because just in general it's probably a higher quality cable. So yeah, it's an absolutely valid warning. Also, I believe some USB-Cs are like created a little differently, and they don't just mean the speed, but like in terms of how the pins are either arranged or how many they are. I'm not an expert on this, and again, I did not pre-watch, so I don't know what exactly he addresses here.
My understanding, the last time I looked at this, is it was only a handful of stores in China, and I don't even know if they were official Apple stores, but there apparently is some validity to it. There's
Original, you're saying same with the lightning cable. You mean like that Apple recommends you get like made for eye lightning cables instead of just potentially like knockoffs, because lightning did not have, yeah, people bought a lot of fakes, but generally you did not have as many issues with lightning as you had with USB-C. Also, the advantage with lightning at that point was that for a small period of time, Apple was by far the only producer of lightning accessories. And the other point, of course, is that the lightning cable was shipped with the iPhone, and you also still had the charger, even though it was a crappy 5-watt charger, right? So people didn't seek out other accessories because they already got what they wanted. In this case with USB-C, yes, you get USB-C, but for example, you are not getting USB-C 3.0. So if you are actually going out and buying like a USB 3 cable, well, then Apple wants to warn you, well, maybe get something that was already like pre-tested for an iPad or a Mac. And yeah, I think there are fakes with everything in the current industry. That's just how extreme globalization works at this point. But I don't think the situation between Lightning and USB-C in their early days was in any way comparable. And by the time USB started coming out around like 2016, 2017, 2018, this was when Lightning was like super mature at that point. We even had like the first Lightning 3 with USB 3.0 speeds, which was the original 12.9-inch iPad Pro with an A9X chip. So we actually got pretty mature Lightning pretty early.
a slightly smaller gap between the single row 9-pin and single row 11-pin connectors.
Yeah, I guess that's probably what I meant. Again, not an expert on this issue. I know there's some like unverified USB-C stuff out there. I wouldn't really worry if you buy like from Anker, Aukey, Ugreen, even your like not really cable companies, but still that somehow build cables, like your Belkins, even your 12 Souths and companies like that. You will probably be fine. It's just that USB-C still is a little bit more open to problems than Lightning is. Isn't it just because Android phones were common? No, the problem with USB-C is that it's completely open and that it's royalty free, basically, which means that everybody could like make USB-C without conceivably a way to really check on them through one like entity. While with Lightning, while you could fake Lightning, for the most part, it was decently cheap enough to just get like the official stuff, like the resource, like the instructions, I guess, from Apple, and just build a pretty standard USB 2 speed, around like 15-20 watt max charge speed Lightning cable, right? And since the Lightning cable would also not work with anything else, right, than your iPhone and your iPad, the ability for the cable to do something crazy was severely diminished. While with USB-C, you had USB-C that you then tested on your smartphone, your tablet, your laptop at that time. Even some desktops started getting USB-C integrated into the motherboard, and then those cables, because they often did not have like any chips that were really good at managing voltage and stuff like that, they could potentially result in overheating if you had like a charger that was like really fast and the phone or laptop that potentially really supported fast speeds, but then the cable didn't. And because there was no like good handshake like we do these days with proper power delivery standards, this is what could create problems. And the cheaper a knockoff, the less likely is that you have like decent amount of copper inside and stuff like that. there was basically no scalability. Those cables might have been built for 15 watts or even 20 or 30 watts, but then you could try more, and with Lightning, well, nothing would happen, right? They would never go above their spec. But with USB-C, with very cheap cables, they would still often try to reach those speeds, and then it would become a problem.
Realistically, the same is probably true of anytime you're using a third-party cable. Apple does apparently have a fuse and an identifier chip in their cable to make sure that it's an authentic cable. I mean, that's sort of not the point of...
No pre-watch, but we're lining up pretty well, I guess, when it comes to explaining it on a basic level.
USB-C, the point is that we can kind of use any cable we want. As you can see, I'm not having any trouble with it, but who knows? They may reject your warranty claim if you do not use an approved cable.
Again, this is really disingenuous. It's not about warranty. It's really about your own safety and you just making informed decisions. Sometimes it's better to spend a little more money up front instead of having to buy something twice, because either the first one broke or the first one was insufficient at all at doing what you wanted, and then you had to buy the more expensive thing that you wanted to buy at first anyway. But now you ended up buying something more expensive and something cheap, and you had a bad experience because you first started working with something cheap. And it's not against something cheap, right? I'm not against saving money, but I am against being like really stingy and getting like really bottom of the barrel stuff.
Hey, at least you're getting pretty decent screen on time. We weren't able to get anywhere near the 23 and 29 hours that they advertised for YouTube playback on the regular Pro and the
Did
Pro
they
Max,
say YouTube
respectively.
playback?
But we did get 17.75 hours and 21.5 hours, which is pretty darn respectable, and that was at 200 nits. We don't know exactly what Apple's test conditions were. It's possible, for example, that they had cellular turned off or they had the screen at minimum brightness. We're not...
Yeah, why would they say YouTube? I'll just briefly catch up to my stream, and yeah, they just say video playback. Video playback is pre-saved videos. It's not YouTube playback. It does not have any kind of connectivity enabled for it whatsoever. It's an artificial test. It's not a mixed usage test. The problem with mixed usage is sometimes you say, well, but you need like Wi-Fi or cellular to run YouTube. Yes, but if you have Wi-Fi or cellular enabled, then you likely will have battery drain also for other background apps that still use networking. So you cannot really, like, you can build a phone that just has YouTube on it and has like background activity turned off for every other app. But that's also not scientific at that point. At that point, it's neither scientific nor is it very useful. What Apple instead tries to do is they try to give you a really scientific test where they just have an offline video that probably really well, like, works really well with like the built-in encoders and decoders. And then they set the display to decent, I guess, SDR brightness, probably not HDR, right? I thought their website says Apple TV. Yeah, I guess that's likely, right? I mean, what's the difference between something that you download from like Apple TV or from iTunes in general? Those are the same format movies and TV shows. I don't think Apple puts like lets Wi-Fi or cellular stay on during their video playback test. It just wouldn't make much sense.
Sure, but those are still very respectable results.
I mean, if Apple ever gets those numbers with Wi-Fi or cellular enabled, again, I've given you my impressions of battery life. Obviously, I've never gotten like 29 hours of screen on time. But yeah, I that is my speculation. I guess I knew more about battery life testing in like previous years. I know that what I'm saying is true for like back to the iPhone 5 era. I don't know if that has changed. So I don't want to put my hand in the fire if I'm wrong, but I don't really see why it would have changed. Like, I'll just go to Apple's website and then I'll just try to find it. Apple.com. Again, you cannot see that because I'm not going to switch off OBS, because OBS just then likes to go haywire with like iPhone 15 Pro, right? And then when we go to the battery life section, I believe that was at the end of the website. Battery life up to 29 hours of video playback on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and up to 23 hours video playback on the 15 Pro, and they are both designated as 0.13 on the website of like extra stuff. And the way they cover it as 0.13 is all battery claims depend on network configuration and many other factors. Actual results will vary. Battery has limited recharge cycles and may eventually need to be replaced. Battery and charge cycles vary by use and settings. Okay, so they don't actually outline this anymore on the website. I think at some point they explained it in some kind of presentation, but I guess I don't have a way to know. This is if Apple's old testing stays true, then I kind of expect 29 hours to not be with any significant network usage. It's either Wi-Fi on but all background tasks are off, or even more likely, I think all background stuff is off. All cellular connectivity is off. Origin, you're saying, honestly, battery timing is very depending on their users. It can be better, but who is watching video for 37 hours exactly on a smartphone? I don't really take company claims on battery life that seriously. Well, there was a time when those tests were more relevant because battery life was really limited, right? Before we hit like around 3000 milliampere hours on most phones, you have to understand that the percentage drain, right? Your processor will still drain stuff, and it does not grow or shrink based on what display size you have, right? Your speakers probably will consume about the same amount of energy and stuff like that. Your modem especially, right? Your modem is not necessarily, does not scale the same way. So the larger battery you have, you might end up like, it might sound like from 1500 to 3000 milliampere hours might be a doubling on battery life. But if everything else is created equal, then it's actually likely to be more than double, because some battery consumption is fixed, right? Your processor will likely still consume the same amount of power. Of course, over a longer period of time, it will consume more, but over the same task, it will consume the same, right? The same goes for your modem and stuff like that. So getting larger phones was a really big win for the battery, because usually with a phone you got a battery that was disproportionately larger to the power drain of the actual phone. It only started to change once we actually started hitting like really power intensive chips, and then with a lot of cooling inside, so those chips could actually run at peak speeds for longer periods of time. But before that, we really, like every 100 milliampere hours, we actually got a meaningful improvement to battery life. It really was a golden era for battery life testing these days. Those days. Well, these days we have so many inconsistencies in testing, so many background tasks that are potentially running, so many stuff where sometimes your Wi-Fi will like randomly be like bad or worse, or better or worse. That honestly, battery life testing these days, if you want to actually do a somewhat scientific test, you have to isolate those other factors. You have to get rid of Wi-Fi, you have to get rid of 5G. But again, we are just talking about the scientific method. We're not actually talking about if it's meaningful in terms of data. Jamie, you're saying, I looked at it, says iTunes video playback, default settings, Bluetooth headphones paired, and auto brightness and true tone off for iPhone SE. Which I guess means that it's not using neither Wi-Fi nor cellular, right? It has only Bluetooth enabled by default. Actually, really great that you looked into it. Thank you. YouTube Kulanchisi, you're saying in some of their Mac ads, they emphasize video playback when you're on airplane. Exactly. Exactly, that's big part of it. Airplane mode, previously, while we had headphones like this for the most part, that was actually really relevant, but over time Apple has started testing some stuff with Bluetooth playback, so that's actually really interesting. Thank you guys, by the way, participating so much in the chat. That actually means a lot to me. Thank you. So I would assume it's local video playback on airplane mode. Airplane mode still allows for Bluetooth to be turned on, so I guess that can work with what Jamie has said. And Jamie, you're saying and with Wi-Fi on. Really? That's how they claim it for the iPhone SE. Wow, I guess then they really turn off all background tasks, because I cannot imagine that, like, even if you have like background messengers like WhatsApp, then it would really drain it. Like, that's actually interesting finding. Thank you so much. Origin unknown, but that doesn't represent an actual user. Exactly. Neither one represents an actual user here. Turning off all background tasks, I sometimes do that because I'm a fucking enthusiast asshole. But whether or not, like, at least it's Wi-Fi on, which honestly maybe I should do like a prolonged battery test and see maybe how much battery life I have after 12 hours of video playback just over Wi-Fi. I could leave it like very close to the router, which also that might be a big difference, right? In most homes you probably consume a lot more Wi-Fi power than you would in a controlled environment, because you probably will not have other devices connected to that router during the test. You probably will have a really great router, so your phone has to do a lot less work in trying to establish a connection, and your phone might also be put very close to the router, which means it loses even less energy to create a stable connection in comparison to regular day usage, where you might actually be like moving back and forth throughout the home. Sometimes it loses the connectivity, sometimes it needs to put more power into the Wi-Fi modem and stuff like that. Really interesting stuff, by the way. Yeah, so thank you. Again, I'll probably look into it later myself. Jamie, you have deleted your comment saying it's on Wi-Fi, so I don't know what that means for me right now. But yeah, we'll see how it what it says exactly. I'll do some research on it. Just briefly making sure that my stream still works fine. Your channel. Yeah, it all works good. Nice.
And in our stress tests, we saw 3.3 hours. This is running 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme on the Pro, and 4 hours on the Pro Max. Those are very respectable results. I want to hook up a monitor. No! I want to do what Framework did. This is so cool. They were memeing on their social media. All like, hey Apple, way ahead of you. We got your USB Type A adapter. Oh, of course it's not compatible with the dbrand case. Okay, sorry dbrand. Love you guys. Go to
But yeah, by the way, a lot of people have over the years like asked why Apple doesn't do like a lot of like plug-in adapters that are really like flush to the device. Like, you know, there are some of those that on the MacBook like will like literally be like skin to skin with your MacBook and stuff like that. The reason why Apple does not do that with iPhones and also not iPads, because my iPads usually share accessories with iPhones, comes down to the fact that many people wear cases, and cases have really inconsistent openings around their ports. So what instead Apple will usually do is they will have an accessory that also has like a small cable connected to it, but then has a really like standard like male part that goes into the female part of the port. So yeah, this is why it's done this way.
Linus.com.
It's also done like if something drops, a small cable will usually be a little more durable than if it's just like really flush with your phone. Then a bad angle can hit the accessory really hard, distribute like the force back to the phone. I know that sounds like really far-fetched, some of it, but you have to understand that Apple really has to test for some ridiculous scenarios. It's kind of how when we talk about like waterproofing, right? Apple is like the one company that goes on stage and says like, yeah, you know, we test with water, but then we also test with like soft drinks and beer, because we know that people actually drink those, and this is why your phone is likely to get into contact with those, right? So Apple really tests for a lot of minutia. Kunanchizi, you're saying, I like Apple's approach to adapters with the short cables better. Oh, so I guess the latency is not that bad if you've already gotten my rant. They make the accessories feel a lot like part of a longer cable that you plug into the adapters. Exactly. It's also a little bit of feel-good factor inside. This is, by the way, Apple used to have like those much more rigid, like it went into like the lightning cable or even USB-C, and then it was like a really hard little cable, right? And then outside you got like your USB-A adapters and stuff like that. Those were a little too hard sometimes. You could really like do some damage if you moved around. So soft cable, soft little cable in between all the way for me.
Go check it out and get your own ghost case, but for now we're gonna have to lose it. Let's go ahead and pop this bad boy in. Woo! Type 8.
Guys, we're almost at 1.5 hours, so I feel obliged to remind you again, if you like what you're seeing, please consider subscribing, liking, sharing, and hitting the notification bell so you don't miss out on my future streams. And if you want to support me directly, you can find the Patreon link in the description of this channel, or if you want to support me directly during my live streams, you can send me either a super chat or a super sticker right in the live chat, which would be very much appreciated.
Port, anyone?
Yeah, it looks cute.
They also showed adding the headphone jack back with their headphone jack module. Of course, that's not what I'm interested in right now. I'm just going to pop out my laptop's HDMI port and plug that in. How cool is that? HDMI iPhone. HDMI phone?
That's a funny joke. That's a funny joke. Well done.
I have no idea what this monitor is. It's an LG something, but I don't know what resolution or what refresh rate it runs at.
The iPhone supports 4K 60.
Is it the iPhone supports? Hey, look at that. We got the...
I actually don't know if it will work. I will say in theory it should work. However, I've had some really bad experience with some USB-C to HDMI adapters, mainly my main Satoshi USB 4 to HDMI 2.1 adapter, which I got from a MacBook, because it has 40 gigabits out, right? So in theory it should support HDMI 2.1's 4K at 120 hertz, which again is what my TV supports. I say that again, I've never mentioned that, I guess. Maybe in one of my PlayStation related videos I've talked about it. But the other point about this is that, yeah, it has never truly worked on my Mac for some reason, and I bought it and then I didn't use it for 2 months. And then I tried it, but I was on a beta that was actually explicitly known to screw up USB-C accessories, and then I didn't use it for a while again, and then I used it with my iPad, and then it worked with my iPad Pro, but then the next time I actually tested it on my MacBook with an official version of it and stuff like that, it didn't work. So I have to use the integrated HDMI 2.0 port, which is of course 4K 60 limited, but yeah, so that's a fun anecdote I guess that I can tell you about. Like, wait, it's not Satoshi, I think it's either Satoshi or Sabrent. I'll inform you once I again get back home and actually go through like my box of unused accessories.
Showtech USB-C to HDMI cable.
Why not test out both? That's a little weird.
I mean, that's not the most elegant thing ever. Ow. You ready? You ready? I think we got this.
Yeah.
Hey. Even just for doing reviews of iPhones back in the day, I would have given my left testicle for this easy, seamless, flawless, free.
iPhones have supported like decent video output for a while. It was much lower quality because the iPhones used to have significantly lower resolution panels, but yeah, iPhones had like at least ever since Lightning you could do decent output. It would be limited to 1080p, but that would still be mostly higher than the iPhone's resolution until we started hitting like the Plus iPhones, right?
In screen capture. Just plug this bad boy into a capture card and you are good to freaking go. How did they not go USB-C sooner? This is awesome. I mean, we know why they didn't, so they could collect their licensing and certification fees.
Nope, that's one. It's the same kind of bullshit that we hear, like when people talk about like, oh, all press is like bought and stuff like that. People really will talk about sometimes pennies for like super large scale corporations, and because it's big money for them, they will sometimes think, oh my god, Apple is like internally ruled by their desire to collect as many made for eye licensing agreements as possible. Oh right, so evil. It's like it's pennies on the dollar for what they make with their overall hardware and services. Like Apple's actual liking to for Lightning, which is a silly way to put it, has a lot to do with just the fact that Apple wanted to go portless, but everything sort of held them up from doing it. And on the iPhone, they've also believed that for a long period of time, most people would just get like a phone with the same cable that they already used to have, right? Or with the same port that they already used to have, because it doesn't hurt anything else. Now, once the ecosystem progressively became more USB-C, yes, that started to like be a bad thing for the overall ecosystem. But for the iPhone itself, and even if you go back to something like AirPods Pro, when these AirPods Pro launched, right? AirPods Pro 2, this is not the USB-C one, is people were saying, why isn't this USB-C with last year's iPhone? And I was like, well, because the iPhone is Lightning. Once Apple gives you a USB-C iPhone, they will also give you a USB-C AirPods Pro, and this is exactly what they did. But when it comes to like just the newest gen of devices, one thing they cannot do, unfortunately, is they cannot just do a very like completely illogical combination of ports, right? If the iPhone is Lightning, guess what? AirPods should be Lightning. That is absolutely true. The one thing why people, I guess, got so used to USB-C, even if they had an iPhone, is partially because, of course, they had other devices like iPads, MacBooks. They had family members who had like Android phones with USB-C. But also, and that's a funny part of how an ecosystem overall works, is the other end of the cables that you got was USB-C. So psychologically, it created questions in a way when like you got like USB-A to Lightning cables you didn't have, but now you're like, well, it's USB-C on one end, might as well be USB-C on both ends. That sounds convenient, right? It would fit also into my other devices. But Apple was like, okay, but people still have like Lightning stuff, maybe from like 10 years ago when the iPhone 5 launched, right? I don't think that was very rational thinking from Apple, but I still understand how they got there. Sometimes change can be much more frightening than it ever should be, right? Because sometimes change will feel so natural once you actually go through with it. And yes, sometimes very big corporations will be frightened of very, very small shit. But I promise you that Made for I is just way, way too small for Apple to even remotely care about.
Lightning cable, but for the user, how did they not do this sooner? The best part is that it's super mature because iOS and iPadOS, let's face it, not that different. And
yeah, of course they're not that different. Why should they be? The difference is in the user experience, with a very different like display size, aspect ratio, with the likeness of with the possibility of you attaching external accessories like keyboards and mice. That's where the difference comes from. From an overall like baseline, Apple wants those operating systems to be extremely similar. At some point, I do assume that iOS, iPadOS, and macOS will feel like almost indistinguishable to a degree. It's just that the from the base code, it's just they will actually feel different to the consumer in what is open to the user. It's not like iPads are fundamentally that limited in their capabilities, especially like the pros. They have like Thunderbolt ports, they have really fast processors, and even iPadOS supports a ton of stuff, but sometimes you'll be like, oh, you just don't have a driver for this, or like randomly the operating system that is built on the same shit as like the Apple Silicon Macs randomly does not give you full access to its inputs and outputs in a way that would allow you to manage OBS, right? It's not a fundamental technological difference, it's a different approach to what the consumer actually sees.
And a lot of this stuff has been awesome in iPadOS for a long time. That's one of the killers for me. It's just like how ahead of the game Apple was on USB-C.
2015, 12-inch MacBook, yep.
On it. Not gonna lie, definitely some upscaling.
Almost 10 years now, 8 years.
Larger display.
8.5 years.
Bad. Oh, what the hell? So if you touch it, it shows. If you're interacting with it, you can see that. Interesting. Yep, that's rendered on an iPhone, all right. And this video is rendered out. Subscribe to Short Circuit. Don't forget to check out.
Okay, so this is a short circuit video, so it will not go into full detail. Neither will I, because I do want to wrap up this video pretty soon. He didn't really talk about the camera that much. He just praised it a little bit when he talked about like videography, which, I mean, it's valid. It has like good video capabilities. It's a little bit of a shame that he didn't talk more. I encourage everyone who hasn't yet to follow me on Twitter, where I've been recently sharing a couple of more images that I've been taking with my 15 Pro Max. I will probably be sharing a lot more over the next couple of days, as I also get like the comparison shots back that I took with the 13 Pro Max. I can say that the 5x camera has actually like low-key become my favorite camera on it. I did not expect that to happen. My main criticism with the 5x is what I actually expected it to be, which is that I need to move in a little further away to get the image that I want, but it's a small price to pay given that it's really much better in terms of quality because it's a larger sensor than the previous 3x, and the fact that it can zoom in a lot further means that I can capture subjects that I previously was not capable of doing. In a way, again, I did test out 10x cameras on the Samsungs. Because they're so bad at low light, a lot of the images that I might actually show you from the 5x on my iPhone would not be looking better on the 10x on the Galaxy, because again, larger sensor, wider aperture in this case as well. So again, very happy with that. HDR is a lot better. Guys, you can also ask questions what you would like to know from like my iPhone experience. I know I've made this stream specifically so that we can interact. I've been feeling like shit since yesterday after reading all the news about Israel and Palestine. So I really wanted to just have a nice get together. I even asked you guys on Twitter like how do you even feel about me streaming today. And by the way, I just want to give a small shout out, I guess. I am not West absorbed. I know about the news in the world. I know that a buttload of people died in Afghanistan, for example, which is just as heartbreaking to me. I do not prioritize white people over brown people or Jews over Muslims or anything else like that. It's just I guess war just hits different for me than natural disasters overall. So forgive me if I haven't mentioned Afghanistan right away. I should have. It's also a very heartbreaking thing. Jamie, some people have said the images from the 5x camera look noisy sometimes. Good question, actually. The 5x will not be noisy, in fact. Well, in low light, of course, any camera can become noisy. However, when people often take 5x zoom cameras or photos or even 3x zooms, what they will often get, in fact, and I've become an expert on this, is they will get instead a cropped image from the main sensor. Now, a 3x, there's actually a chance that the cropped in image from the main sensor sensor will be better than the 3x, right? Especially the old 3x that actually had like was like a smaller sensor than we now have on the 5x. But now on the 5x, it will most of the time will be better than the cropped in image. The only thing why we even have that at all is because technically the main sensor is still of course better in low light. So maybe an image would be like completely black basically on the 5x in the way it wouldn't even highly cropped in on the main sensor. However, when people get like really noisy images on that 5x, they often in fact see a cropped in image from the main sensor and not an actual image from the 5x sensor. You can go to an app like Halide where you can actually force it to use a specific camera. Unfortunately, in the main camera app you cannot do that. It will always just decide for you automatically which looks better. But I've tested it out a lot on my cat that you can by the way see here. Ain't she a cutie? You can see that sometimes like I've gotten it, sometimes it's very rare that you can force it to do that, to like capture a main camera photo at like zoomed which zoomed in right onto the main sensor, but then you maybe like move the camera just a slight angle difference and you get like a tad better light, and boom, it suddenly starts to work with the 5x and you got an image that isn't noisy because you still get native like 12 megapixels. So yeah, the 5x is great, and yes, it will get noisy if you move zoom in even further, and it will of course get noisy in very low light, but overall it is actually way better than the 3x. I absolutely stand by that. So thank you, Jamie. That's actually a really good question and a really important one, because unfortunately many people will not understand how their phone behaves and just generally believe, oh, 5x is a little weird in how it behaves, right? No, if you know, like obviously if you take a picture, you go into the Photos app, you move it up, that opens up like the settings, and then it shows you if it says 24 millimeter 1.78 aperture, that means it was captured on the main sensor. If it says 120 millimeter f2.8 aperture, then it means it was actually captured on the 5x, and you will really see the difference. I probably will have to post something like this on Twitter so you guys can actually see it. I'm not opening up now the Photos app for privacy reasons on my Mac because I don't know what is in there, and I don't think I actually have that good comparison shots between the 1x and the 5x right away, but I will prepare it for you. Like, look out for it over the next week on my Twitter account. I think that's actually a really good and important discussion to have. Also, now we've talked a lot about the 5x. I can say that the ultra wide is way better than on my 13 Pro Max. I still am not quite happy with how aggressive it sometimes recommends like the ultra wide as like a macro capability, because unfortunately the main criticism for iPhones for a couple of years has been that you cannot really capture images pretty up close with the main camera. You have to get, I would say, a decent amount away from it, right? I haven't done scientific testing. Some websites actually test that, like the minimal focus difference. And then the ultra wide jumps in a way that if the sensor was actually smaller, right, even on the way it was on my 13 Pro Max, it actually didn't used to do that as aggressively. So my 13 Pro Max could get closer to a subject with the main camera, which means I was less reliant on capturing ultra wide photos, but then again, the ultra wide now, thankfully at least, is much better on my 15 Pro Max. It's about the same hardware as on the 14 Pro Max, but it also benefits from Smart HDR5 and all the A17 improvements and things like that. Should be an option in the normal camera app. Yeah, it should be an option in the camera app to just force whatever sensor you are hitting. My personal suggestion is, you know how with the new camera, right, with how you can change between 24 millimeters, 28 millimeters, and 35 millimeters, right? You just tap on the 1x. My suggestion would be, if you tap on the 5x, is you always force for it to actually be 5x, right? That it does never use the 1x. Of course, you can also turn it off in the settings in general, but sometimes the auto settings are still doing their job reasonably well. I just sometimes want to turn them off. So yeah, I guess Apple should hire me for shit like this, right? It's such like UX design that really comes from actually being a regular user and actually being an enthusiast user for so many features, where I would say that I probably have a better understanding of some of that shit on how it probably should behave in real life than some Apple designers. Not because in any way I'm a better designer or a better engineer than they are, but probably because I'm more of a power user for smartphones than they actually are. I kind of would be surprised if a lot of the photography guys at Apple actually like working more with like real cameras, right? Because again, I always bring this up, it's like the difference between a 1-inch sensor, a full 1-inch, the iPhone is not full 1-inch, by the way, it's way smaller than that, it's 1 by 1.28, but let's even say a full 1-inch sensor that is, for example, the biggest sensor that like the Xiaomi 13 Ultra has or something like that, that still is 7.5 times smaller than a full frame 35mm sensor on a like nice expensive DSLR or mirrorless camera. So if you really want actual great results, yes, iPhones will have like night mode for good results. They will have like portrait modes in a more customizable way than you get with fixed optics. Sure, you might get the most natural bokeh with fixed optics and especially with really large sensors, but you will not be able to customize it in the same way. And then of course iPhones benefit from the image signal processing capabilities and the neural engine of Apple's best-in-class chips, and the fact that even a Sony camera, right, like they will get like box standard chips in there, shit like that. I would love a professional like camera. Like, can you imagine like a Sony camera working with like an A17 Pro inside? And because you never need the A17 Pro to actually do any general compute, you can just always run the image signal chip at full speed, but then also utilize parts of the CPU, parts of the GPU for some of the image processing. Suddenly you have like the best camera, even without changing optics in any way. Just how good the algorithms have gotten on smartphones. Yeah. So I guess that leaves like the main, no, it leaves the front camera for me to address, which is glorious. Like I've seen like Max Tech's video on like iPhone 15 Pro quality, and I was surprised just how good and consistent the front-facing results were. And I'm like, okay, maybe they were lucky, because I've never had like the best experiences with front-facing cameras on any devices. This is the most consistent front-facing camera I've ever worked with. And you know guys, I set up a lot of Android devices for my friends. I've gone through multiple generations of iPhones myself. I've owned Android devices myself. So I know selfies. I hate selfies. I don't like capturing selfies, but it's still something that I'm aware a lot of people care about. And honestly, from every test that I've seen, the iPhone is by far the best selfie camera you can currently get, which is surprising because once again, they didn't really change the hardware. It seems like it's just smart HDR5. So that's really, really cool. And I guess that now leaves the main camera, which is just phenomenal. It's the same sensors on the 14 Pro, but without any of the HDR issues on that phone. So it's by far the best camera currently on a smartphone. We will see how well the Pixel 8 Pro will compare. Mr. Who's the Boss seems to think the selfie camera needs a big upgrade for some reason. Well, I would say if you compare like the overall sharpness with like a main sensor image, it's like way worse still, right? You cannot really like zoom in onto details for the front-facing camera, but you don't like, it's not really how I see selfies, right? It's a small sensor. Of course it's a small sensor. It's a small opening for the sensor. There's only so big you can get it. But overall, yeah, I guess Apple could like put in like a 20-25% larger sensor without like necessarily making the dynamic island any larger. But when you look at actually like Android phones, they're even more limited. They have like even smaller cutouts for the camera in the screen, and they actually want to get rid of them. So can you imagine, like, from what I understand, the S24 Ultra and probably even the S25 Ultra still will not go with under-screen cameras. Apparently this tech just isn't improving. They definitely will not give you like a 2 times wider opening for a significantly like larger aperture and all the optics that you would also need to feed a larger sensor, right? You cannot just put in a larger sensor under a super small opening. That's just not how light works. Again, front-facing camera, by no means up to par with the other sensors and stuff like that, but in my opinion, it's now good enough. When I got my 13 Pro Max, I made an argument that is, in retrospect, a little silly, but I said that for like good light scenarios, it's basically endgame, right? And that was because I was testing it not like against the light, so I didn't have like any HDR issues, because I said, selfies are not that important. Fundamentally, if you really care about the quality of an image, you probably still want to capture it on the back, on one of the main real cameras on the back. And with the 15 Pro, I actually have to say it's kind of endgame realistically. Like, I guess you would say selfies will get even better if you start considering the back cameras as selfies, right? Maybe with a foldable device, you can actually say, oh, it's technically still a selfie, right? Because I can see myself while capturing that image. That obviously is great, but when we are talking just regular like metal and glass sandwich phones with no like extra screen right next to the back cameras, I think selfies will not get that much better, honestly. I think we might still get like even larger sensors, stuff like that, but fundamentally I don't like, maybe selfies will get like twice as good over the next 5 to 10 years, but how much that actually matters, like 2x is not that much because the baseline is like decent, but it's not comparable to like, I don't expect the selfie camera to even catch up with what we have on like the main camera right now, and by that point we'll have like probably larger than full 1-inch sensors and stuff like that on the back. So this is, I guess, where I'm coming from with selfies, which is I understand that people take them and I'm happy that they are better than ever, but I kind of also see no real reason to make them even better than that, because I kind of want people to capture real images with the back cameras because they have like the nice bokeh effect without even portrait mode. You can really play around with like the lens settings. It's like really, really cool. So in a way that I think the front-facing camera just isn't. It looks more flat and stuff like that. It's not bad, but that, I guess that's just my impression. I know it's a little rambly, but I hope that still shows you what I care about. Oh, also one extra thing I wanted to really mention. Microphone quality is better than on my 13 Pro Max, but it was already good. The one thing that is actually really a lot better, and I did not expect to get much better until I saw MaxTech's video, was the speaker. The speakers are really great in the iPhone. They're like really reliably loud. They have really good quality. I just got some frame starters. I don't know what is at fault. Maybe I just switched ingest servers at YouTube. My connection still looks pretty stable, and my internet still looks pretty fast. I hope it all works. So the speakers are really nice and room feeling. Now they are not obviously going to be a comparison for this 4-speaker layout on my iPad Pro, but they're really nice and a noticeable improvement even over my 13 Pro Max. And as most tests have shown, they've by far beat out any Android devices currently. I guess Google would have had the chance if they like stuck with their like front-facing speakers that they used to have, but for now Apple seems to be pretty unchallenged. Maybe there's some giant gaming phone with front-facing speakers that does it even better, but I don't really consider them in the same league as iPhones. I just don't see them as real competition. Guys, you can send me as many questions as you like. I'm pretty energetic right now. I don't have any next week is my last like full week of holidays, so I'm don't have anything planned for tomorrow, so I'm pretty open if you want to have any questions. Of course, we're now at almost 2 hours, so I'll do a small reminder again. If you like the video, if you like and enjoy the channel, please consider subscribing, liking, giving the video a thumbs up, sharing it with somebody, hitting the notification bell so that you know when I actually go live. We now have 6,300 people on this channel. It actually matters that you hit the notification bell. And if you want to support me directly, as I've said before, you can now find the Patreon link in the description of this channel, or, which is also very welcome, you can send me in the live chat a super chat or a super sticker, and when the video is actually already there, you can even send something that is called like a super thanks, I believe. Apple didn't mention it, but LiDAR sensor got silently upgraded. I'm curious how this is helping photos and videos. The focus is better than it was on my 13 Pro Max. I don't know like what is actually like contributing to that, I guess. My internet just had a big hiccup. I have no idea why that happened. Yeah, from what I understand, LiDAR helps with like some of the portrait mode capture, like the automatic like portrait mode that you don't need to directly put into portrait mode. When it comes to just focusing in general, LiDAR seems to help in terms of video focus on like low light, for like low light images especially. So yeah, but it has already worked well on me for my 13 Pro Max. I know it's better technically here, but I don't think it's going to be the meaningful change that you will notice. It will be part of all the other changes that come together and that work well. Maybe portrait mode edge detection, it works really well. It's not perfect, like if you're capturing images of a cat, like it will definitely not be perfect, but it will be better than previous generations. I don't think any phone is perfect when it comes to portrait edge detection. Origin, you're asking, do you think you will ever go to Android, and what would you need to change to Android to make you switch? Well, to be honest, I've used to have like a secondary phone, so I was always like, for a long period of time, I was a dual wielder, right? I had an iPhone and a Galaxy, but then I gave that up once I switched to the 13 Pro Max because the battery life was so good on that one, and it was a little heavy and large, so I didn't really consider like burdening myself to still like carry around a second phone. So overall, I would say that I would probably not switch to Android anytime soon, but I would consider getting a secondary Android phone if we maybe ever get like a next gen, like really small, like really practical Android phone, like maybe like an S25 once they get like with 3 nanometer chips and something like that. Maybe Samsung could have like some really great tech, but I probably would not want to have like 2 like phones, one that is a Pro Max, one that is an Ultra, right? Really large devices and stuff like that. So for now, I really like, my interest in Android, honestly, right now is lower than it was 5 years ago. Like ever since like iOS 12, Apple has been like checking so many boxes of stuff that was missing in iOS or in iPhone hardware that quite honestly, I have not really looked back. Like I gave up my old Android phone to a girl I knew and liked. She really needed it. I never looked back. And then with my iPhone 13 Pro Max, I was so happy that I never even considered getting a secondary Android. I guess at some point I might be interested in like a Google Pixel. Like I like the Pixel 8, but I probably wouldn't get it with its, like, it will not have a better camera than my Pro Max, right? Like the Pixel 8 Pro might have a better camera for like stills photography, but not the regular Pixel 8. And then in every other point, my iPhone will be better anyway, like better speakers, better displays, stuff like that, over like the non-pros. And with Samsung, everything that isn't the Ultra is also not really a worthy counterpart to my Pros or Pro Max devices. They usually don't have LTPO displays. They might start having them next year. Next year we might not even get the latest Snapdragon chips in the non-Ultra Samsungs. We might instead get Exynos 2400 in those devices. They don't have the same RAM amount, the same storage options. They sometimes don't get the fastest USB-C and stuff like that. By fast, by the way, I mean like charging. I don't care about anything higher than like 5 or 10 gigabits anyway. So there's a lot that might interest me in an Android, but when it comes to switching, probably not. Dual wielding, maybe, if the money gets like really good and if somebody wants to help me with like a super chat or a super sticker, that's one thing. Like help me buy a secondary Android device, I guess, right? Maybe at that point I would do like the MKBHD thing and always use like an iPhone and an Android. Like this channel has grown like super quickly, so who knows what happens with me and the channel and the support here. But overall, I don't think switching is in my near future. Quality seems to now be mostly consistent. I apologize for the hiccups. They are internet related, it seems, which probably means that like something is like clogging up the 5G, which is weird, because again, I'm using the personal hotspot from my iPad and it seems to be working mostly fine now. So I hope that YouTube will actually correct that to just be a really smooth, nice video. So yeah, so I guess that probably answers in a very convoluted way your question, Origin, of me ever switching to Android, or I guess switching in the near-term future. The thing that could get me to really switch is easy. It's Apple becoming lazy. Like this is why I've honestly made this channel. It's because I was in absolute disagreement with the idea that Apple was like getting lazy, and I really wanted to cover that. If Apple ever gets lazy, expect me to be the first guy to point that out. Jamie, did you see that Qualcomm predicts up to 20,000 points on Geekbench 5 for M3 Pro CPU? I did not see that it's what they expect, but I guess I can do a little bit of research. You said M3 Pro, right? So I'll go to like Geekbench 6, cross-platform benchmark, browser. I will speculate a lot more about M3 before it actually comes out. Believe me, guys. We've talked a lot about what I expect about the M3 generation, or 3nm chips from Apple in general. But like Mac benchmark charts. So 20,000, I assume you mean like multi-core, right? So the current M3, M2 Pro has 14,200 points in Geekbench. That's 12 by 14.2. It's a 40% uplift. It could be. I don't know if it would apply to the Pro. it could apply to the Max, because we got the rumor that the Max chips would get significantly more cores. Like they would move up from 8 performance cores to 12 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. While the M3 Pro might stay on 8 performance cores. Now, judging from the uplift in the A17, which is 10% faster than the A16, which is 10% faster than the A15, right? Because the M2 chip is more equivalent to the A15 than it is to the A16. So that would be like a 20 to maybe 25% performance uplift. That wouldn't be enough to reach 20,000 points. But I do expect it would probably reach around like 18,000, I guess, right? I do expect it to be a higher uplift than on the iPhone, because Macs are not as power constrained. You probably could add like a watt or two to the peak performance, but I do not necessarily expect it to be that much disproportionately better than the iPhone. Atif, sir, should I buy 14 Pro Max or 15 Pro? Tell me first iPhone I'm buying. Well, that depends, right? Do you mean like you would be choosing between the 15 Pro Max or the 14? Or would you choose between the 14 Pro Max and the 15 Pro, like the non-Max? I guess you could. They could be very similar in price, right? You get like the smaller Pro. I honestly have to say, if battery life and like if we're really talking about the choice between like a Max device and a non-Max device, and you're somebody who really cares about battery life, then I would probably recommend you get the 14 Pro Max, especially if it's even cheaper than a 15 Pro, right? If you're just choosing between the Maxes, it probably depends a little on your budget, what it's worth buying to you. I'm of course an enthusiast. I do have enough money to usually get the iPhone that I want. So yes, I would recommend the 15 Pro Max, especially like it has a better camera, it is even faster, it will probably have better battery life for most people, if we are talking about Max versus Max, right? But if you're choosing between the 14 Pro Max and the 15 Pro non-Max, then you have to decide that based on your own personal needs in terms of, well, how much do you value a larger display? Well, how much do you value the better cameras that you would get on the 15 Pro versus the battery life that you would get on the 14 Pro Max? And obviously I cannot make those decisions for you. And of course, with a last gen device, I of course cannot know how much cheaper it might be in your region right now than a current gen device. Let me just open OBS again so that I know if it all works well for now. Yes, seems like the stream is actually working. I'm of course still open for all kinds of questions. I really like interacting with you guys. We still have a decent amount of people watching, which I'm really happy about. I know it's can be difficult for people to know when to join, because obviously we all operate in different timelines and stuff like that. So I'm really happy that you guys could join me. Maybe there's some breaking news you would like me to address. I don't know if anything has happened while I was streaming, and I'm not talking about world news, because believe me, I know about that. Let me just briefly check. There is nothing on like 9 to 5 Mac. Nothing, I guess, on Mac rumors then. Yep. Yeah, the Sunday, like on Sunday, what we usually get is like the Mark Gurman Power Run report, but we don't get much else. Atif, I have switched from my 13 Pro Max to now fully to my 15 Pro Max. I have a 15 Pro Max with 1 terabyte of storage. It's a whole story. I probably wouldn't have bought 1 terabyte knowing what I know now. I kind of expected that next year my cousin would be taking my phone, and she usually needs as much storage, but given that her 11 Pro has been kind of slowly dying, she probably will like upgrade in the next couple of months. So I'm now stuck with a 1 terabyte model. Not that I'm complaining, but I personally definitely don't need much above like 512. Jamie, I'm excited to play the AAA games on the iPad and iPhone. Yeah, by the way, I really want to tell that to people, right? It's not just for the iPhone. A lot of people have complained about like the pricing for some of those AAA games. But the point with those games is that they also work on like the M1 iPad and newer, because obviously the M1 iPad has still more compute juice than even the A17 chip, because it's just a larger, more power-hungry chip. And in that regard, I absolutely like COD Mobile. I like it on my iPhone. I enjoy it on my iPhone. But for the vast majority of time, I just love to play it on a 4:3 aspect ratio, mini LED 120 hertz iPad, where like my thumbs are not in the way because they are such a small part of the screen. I'm so much better. Like even on my iPhone, by the way, I'm one of the best COD Mobile players, but on my iPad, I just absolutely fucking slay. Like I just get into a game and it's basically automatic GG. Yeah, I am better with like my fingers and multi-touch than I am while using a controller. It's not showing off much. It's just the truth. What made me skip the 14 series? Well, for one, I'm not that interested in year-to-year upgrades anymore. Like, I don't think the upgrades are substantial enough to really warrant that these days. I also think that the environmental impact sucks a little. For example, I actually kept my iPhone XS Max for a full 3 years before I upgraded to the 13 Pro Max. I really cared about 120 hertz, and I knew that it eventually would be coming to an iPhone. So I skipped the 11 series because, sure, that was a nice one, long battery life, very bright displays, good cameras, triple cameras, nice year, but it's a year-to-year upgrade, not really a must-have. Then the 12 series came out, and yes, it had like 5G, but it still didn't have ProMotion. And one thing that I didn't like was that its battery was actually a little worse than on the 11 Pro Max. So I waited for the 13 Pro Max, and I was completely satisfied with that device. Like in retrospect, the only thing that I really experienced negatively on this device was cooling. We had like a really super hot summer, and I was like going out to restaurants more often because my financial situation changed a little, and I was sitting in the sunlight because they didn't have like the umbrellas right where I like to sit, and my phone got like really blazing hot in that sunlight, and it had to dim a metric fuck ton. So I actually ended up like using it over like Bluetooth headphones while still keeping it in my pants and not actually watching a video while I was listening to it. So I guess that is the most negative experience. I skipped the 14 series afterwards because I did not care for the dynamic island by itself, right? I never had a problem with the notch to begin with. I was plenty happy with the cameras on the 13 Pro, and I knew that like the HDR issues weren't really fixed with the 14 series, and I knew that battery life wasn't necessarily better, but of course there was the EU thing, which is I knew that USB-C would be coming, and similar to how I waited for a ProMotion until it actually hit an iPhone, I waited for USB-C to actually hit an iPhone, and then I got the iPhone. Jamie, I think 120 hertz is overrated. 120 hertz feels amazing at first, but then I got used to it, and now it feels like how 60 hertz used to feel like. Well, getting used to it does not actually mean that it feels worse, right? If you will put a 60 hertz phone next to it, you will feel the difference. Overall, I would say that the reason why I care about 120 hertz is like purely from an enthusiast perspective, right? Like, look, I asked my mom, I got her the 13 Pro Max, I put it against the 12 Pro Max, I put it in like low power mode where it was like 60. She didn't really see the difference to 120 hertz. Fact is, 60 hertz is still smooth, but I do like having the best, and the 13 Pro Max obviously brought other improvement. If the if the 13 Pro Max had like low battery life because of ProMotion, I probably wouldn't have gotten it, right? Imagine if it had like the same display the same battery size as the 12 series, but then the ProMotion screen was not more efficient than before, but less so, right? To run at high refresh rates. I probably would have waited another year. But then the cameras were also so much better at that point than my 10s Max. Battery life, again, performance was so much better, right? Moving from an A12 chip to an A15 chip with a full GPU cores, with 6 gigs of RAM instead of 4. Like, again, I had like a phone that had like 2 back cameras. Now it became 3. So there was a lot that added up on top of ProMotion. But overall, for most normal people, I would actually agree with you. I don't think like having 120 hertz is a killer feature for that many people. I think I am in the minority, but I do care, especially since my iPad is 120 hertz, my MacBook is 120 hertz, and I can put my TV into 120 hertz. I don't really do that because the PlayStation 5 is not really that powerful for 120 stuff, but I play a lot of games at like 90 FPS, right, in like variable refresh rate, and I can really feel the difference there. So I kind of love 90 hertz, I guess, and if I can get it through like the most efficient screen possible with like an LTPO variable refresh rate thing, then I actually really want to get it. Why not? Origin 99, overrated. I don't agree, especially in games. Well, I actually would disagree with you, Origin, here, which is I think on mobile games I wouldn't put it in 120 hertz modes. I would put it on my iPad because my iPad has power to spare and good battery life, but on a smartphone that is also potentially more likely to get super hot and to potentially even overheat to the point of having to dim down at the very least, I probably would not game actually at 120 hertz or at 120 FPS to be more precise on my smartphone. Plus, Apple not adding 120 hertz was a bit insulting. Low-end phones had it. Yes, but 120 hertz will have some negative impacts on non-LTPO panels. Like they sometimes don't have a perfect frame rate. They like frame pacing, to be more precise. They will consume often a lot more battery life, and they might be like not as precise in terms of colors once you like very brightness. But yes, I do believe that Apple, what I believe should have happened is that this year Apple should have added 90 hertz and a very bright screen to the 15, and then the Pros should have kept like their same brightness screen, but then it's LTPO, it's 120 hertz at peak, and it supports always on display in a way that the regular one doesn't. I think that would be perfect differentiation. I think if they had priced the iPhone 15 at $700 and $800, that would be more acceptable. But given the $800 and even $900 starting price, when we're talking about something like the 15 Plus, we were talking about $1,000 once we start talking about the 256 gigabyte iPhone 15 Plus, right? I do believe that 90 hertz would be nice, and I think that 90 hertz would not be as battery impacting, not as processor impactful, and it's like you could just fix it at 90 hertz and then in low power mode switch it to 60. It feels smoother but doesn't really change the experience. Yeah, I guess that's true. But you know what? I think a lot of things don't fundamentally change the experience while actually being better, right? I think OLED has been in that regard a little overrated because OLED is good and OLED has like perfect blacks, and I guess those are the most experience changing thing. But for me, I've actually found that I prefer regular like SDR colors a lot more on an LCD or like a mini LED panel. When it comes to refresh like response time, yes, OLED is way faster, but I don't really care about that much on a smartphone. I care that about on my gaming TV. This is why it's OLED. So yeah, like a lot of things I believe can just be better in some ways without needing to fundamentally change your experience. We are buying phones that cost like above $1,000. We deserve some niche features. We believe we deserve some niceties. We deserve some gimmicks, one could say. And I do believe that 120 hertz is better to have it than not have it. We just need a breakthrough in battery tech. Yeah, we've been saying that since like the 1980s, bro. And phones will change drastically. 165 hertz might be possible, faster chips and everything. Well, 165 hertz, I believe, is the fastest refresh rate you can currently get on a smartphone. I know you can definitely get 144 hertz on like gaming phones these days. It's a shame actually in Android that so many games don't actually support 120 hertz that actually do support it on the iPhone. So that's funny. But I believe you have some 165 hertz phones. It just so happens that, again, yeah, you're right. Without a battery revolution, it really won't be that feasible. And even then, imagine if a battery revolution is actually only like 20% more dense, right? Do you really want to give all of that up for a marginal improvement to smoothness on the display at that point? Does it really matter at that point? Would you not like to get those 20% more battery capacity put back right into actual battery life? I guess that's kind of would be my perspective. I don't know about how you feel. It's not quite half an hour has passed, but I can recommend it again. If you like what you're seeing or like the content on this channel in general, please consider subscribing, sharing, giving the thumbs up, and of course hitting the notification bell so you actually know when I'm going live. If you want to support me directly, consider subscribing to my Patreon. The link to that is in the description of this channel. Or if you want to support me really directly while we talk and stuff like that, consider giving a super chat or a super sticker right in the live chat, or once the video has actually gone live, like post-live, I guess, you can give me a so-called super thanks, which I didn't even know existed. Also, by the way, battery breakthrough, I guess we will get something like similar to a battery breakthrough once we get like the EV tech into smartphones, right? Like stacked batteries we'll probably get like next year, will probably result in like 10 to 15% denser batteries. However, density is in that regard volumetrically. It's not actually like a reduction in weight. It means that you can put a lot more like battery material in the same volume, but you won't really be saving on weight, unfortunately. Depends on what you're doing on the phone. For me, I do tend to be a bit more power hungry user. Well, yeah, I guess power hungry user actually would probably benefit a little more from more battery life than from marginally faster smoothness, right? And Jamie, you're saying graphene batteries seem like a battery breakthrough. I guess the thing that I'm probably most excited about is like the Toyota batteries. I don't know how actually realistic they will be. Like they're semi-solid state, which is that only one side is actually like solid. I'm not an expert. So there will be still some like movement through semi-fluids and stuff like that, but they seem to have like really increased density. I don't know how transferable that will be to like much smaller batteries. I don't know how exactly they manage heat and stuff like that. But I guess this is probably, except for stacked batteries, which are a marginal improvement, but an improvement nonetheless, I guess semi-solid state is probably the closest thing in the industry that we have. And then we have, of course, like we have potentially dry electrode coating, we have graphene, as you are saying, Jamie. However, all of those technologies have kind of been in the coming for like the last 20 years. We don't know how mass producible they actually are. And say what you want about Apple, they really are a slave to what is mass producible. Like they are not like in the game of like using a technology that maybe they can manufacture 1 million of for a year. No. They want to keep selling their 200 million phones a year. And they want a technology that then scales to iPads and stuff like that. I guess if maybe we could get like maybe graphene batteries first into an Apple Watch, right? That could be interesting, because obviously the overall capacity of battery production that you need to power all Apple Watches is significantly smaller than all the battery production you need to power all iPhones. So if Apple could have like a double density graphene semi-solid state battery making its debut in the Apple Watch, similar to how OLED displays were first introduced on the Apple Watch, and how micro LEDs will probably be the next technology that will be first introduced in the Apple Watch before moving to the overall Apple ecosystem, that might work. Again, it's highly speculative. Everything can happen and nothing can happen. You know how that works with all those technologies. We've had like germanium and graphene stuff, like also for like processors. Is it germanium? What was the supposed like successor to silicon for processors, right? I don't remember. Was it germanium? I'm blanking, but then again, it's 11:30 p.m. so it's hard to fully focus as I did before. But I really am enjoying our conversation. Jamie, graphene batteries allow for faster charging, more energy density, small. I know that. I know all of that, bro. It's just I don't know why I'm saying bro. It's usually not in my vocabulary. It's just that again, the question is how mass producible are they? Like especially for the iPhone. I don't think that we'll see a battery revolution in the next 5 years. I think we'll probably getting stacked batteries next year, and then nothing else for the next 4 years after that, and then maybe after that we'll finally see a glimpse of something actually innovative in the battery sphere. It just might be that batteries are not as scalable. They're not like semiconductors in that regard, unfortunately. There seem to be some ways to make batteries a lot more dense, which usually come with much higher price tags and much more difficult production. And unfortunately, we don't seem to have found solutions to actually overcome that. Like, there is no Moore's law for battery density. I wish there were, believe me, I wish there were. Imagine if like processors and batteries could like develop at a similar pace. Mind blown where we would be now with device performance, battery life, just versatility. Like, imagine if you can have a process like now a 3nm processor paired with a battery that is like 8 times denser than what we currently have. Origin, you're probably one of the most down-to-earth Apple users I've met. I'm mostly stuck with Apple fanboys around me who think owning an iPhone is grounds to look down at every other phone. No, I'm not that. Like, I mentioned that in one of my prior chats, which is I was engaged 2 years ago, and I was obviously together with that woman for a while, and she had like a super old iPhone, right? And who cares, right? I know some people will look at like, oh, is it an iPhone? Okay, how new is the iPhone? How much does the user actually know about it? Do they get the highest like storage version? No, bro, I have never been like that. Like, it so happens that everybody around me has over time become really to a degree a fan of Apple technology. Like my two best friends still use Android phones, but one uses Samsung, one uses a Google Pixel, but the other both have now switched to an iPad for like some like side stuff, right? One draws, the other took notes at university. In fact, they both got like decent iPad Pros. One has an M1 iPad Pro, one has an A12Z iPad Pro. One of them has a MacBook because she really, that was her entry point into the Apple ecosystem. And because I was able to also help people, I've told people, I can help you with Android devices, I can help you with Windows devices, but quite honestly, if you want the best help from me, get a freaking Apple stuff, then I can even like remote control you and do all kinds of shit and stuff like that. And they were like, yeah, okay, I do trust you. And this is how a lot of people, like my cousin was like a diehard like Android user. She was like, oh, I really like the colors and the cameras are so versatile, and that, but then she like got an iPhone 11 Pro and she loves it. And she said, like I got my nieces, but it's collective presents, I guess. I bought my two small nieces iPhones. Both got a 12 mini, which is perfect for them. They don't need the longest battery life or anything. And when one got it, there was no 13 mini out there, so it's not like I'm cheapening out on them. But yeah, and of course there's also now the family aspect, right? We all share Apple One, we share cloud storage with each other, we share like parent controls for my nieces, so I'm also like giving like them the okay or not okay for like what apps they can download. I'm also their godfather, so I do know how to protect them. So there's a lot in my life that honestly has trended the Apple way. But I have never been against Android. I always liked the versatility, and quite honestly, I just always liked having an Android device to have like a Game Boy Advance emulator so I could play Pokemon Emerald. So I'm really a simple dude in that regard. I am not showboaty. I do like fine things. Like my favorite food is lobster dunked in caviar. How is it pronounced in English? Like fish eggs. But like premium black fish eggs or even white ones. But I do that once a year because I like that. It's not I don't like that because it's expensive, but unfortunately it's expensive and I like it. And the same thing goes with Apple. I wouldn't like Apple less if they were cheaper. I would appreciate it because that would hit my wallet less hard. If Android was an actual competitor to me, right? If they were actually fulfilling my needs, hell, I wouldn't obviously go against saving 20% on my purchase to get something that I might actually enjoy more. Why would I? That is just dumb behavior. And if somebody really only has like $500 to spend on a phone, I fully understand why they might want like maybe a 1-year-old Android rather than a 4-year-old iPhone. So no, you will never see me like judging people for having Android or having Windows or having an old iPhone or having an old Mac. You will never see me judge people for that. I know how brilliant some people are that aren't in the slightest interested in technology. Like I myself am a med student. What I'm talking about here is like not even my primary field of expertise. So I know a ton of people who are way more brilliant than I could ever hope to be, and they don't give a fuck about technology. So why should I or at least like consumer technology, so why should I judge them for the freaking phone they have in their pocket that they might only ever use WhatsApp for? Right? I would be the most dumb motherfucker on the planet if that was my approach to life or technology. It's my hobby. I judge myself for what I have, not because of financial reasons, but because sometimes I'm like, oh man, I really want to play around with this specific feature. Man, I wish I had that new device that actually had this feature, right? But I guess that's not really judging. That's kind of a little regret, I guess. But that's what I think about. I don't judge others for their choices in terms of technology. God beware, what would the world come down to if we would put judgment even to that? We already judge each other for like religion, sexual orientation, and all that shit that should be absolutely no concern of others. And then imagine putting technology into that equation. We would all explode. Jamie, I just realized that we never found out what compute module 13.1 and compute module 13.3 were, which were found in iOS. Yeah, I actually remember what you're saying. Yeah, I don't think, like, people were like saying those were some kind of potential accessories and stuff like that, maybe some kind of new like graphic stuff, or even like the Mac Pro, why it was found in the iOS settings was like weird. Yeah, we never found out. Probably something cancelled. Origin, I had a friend starve themselves to get an iPhone. I don't care for that attitude, man. I really don't. Just because of social status. Well, the 14 is a great phone, but no, you shouldn't starve yourself to have one, nor should you buy one because you care about the social status of it. Jamie, wasn't there a story about how someone sold their child from... I remember like organ stuff, like people sell like their kidneys. But yeah, I do remember something about child. I remember a really bad story where I not even I don't know if it was just for a smartphone, right? But they sold their child for like, you know, bad services. So they like not even fully, but like, you know, like I cannot say it because of YouTube. I honestly don't want to say it because it probably will bum me out. But yeah, I remember seeing some weird shit. But you have to understand, it doesn't really like have anything to do with iPhones. The people doing this probably would find something else to care, right? They will want to find like the latest t-shirt or sneakers that everybody else cares about. They will find something to really mess themselves up. And I really propagate like really self-care here. Like you should fundamentally care about yourself, and you should, a part of that self-help that I'm trying to give you guys is the love for a shared hobby. It's for tech. Like, I mean, sure, we can all also have other hobbies. For example, I for a while was really politically active. I was in the center-left party of Germany. I was even like on a local level, like helping moderate debates between like politicians and shit. It was really interesting to me. It still is, but politics have started bumming me out a little. So guess what? I distanced myself from it. I've spent a lot of time on the girl that I mentioned, my previous fiance. But again, I got overly attached and emotionally I started neglecting myself. So we split eventually. Self-care is really important, and I'm not a Jordan Peterson guy. I will not tell you to go clean up your room. I will actually tell you to go clean up your head and actually focus on yourself, focus on stuff that you like, and try to find some stuff that isolates you less. This is, for example, why with technology, I'm a big fan of smartphones, tablets, laptops. You don't see me advocating for a Metaverse, right? You don't see me advocating for bullshit NFTs. You see me advocating sometimes for playing some VR games and then putting that fucking VR headset off and don't putting it back on until you have a new game to play. This is what I'm advocating for you to have fun. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm enjoying a 2.5-hour chat with you that started with like discussing Linus and turned into just a general life conversation and general enjoyment of technology conversation. And this is exactly why growing this channel to like 6,000 members means so much to me. This is why I sometimes ask you guys for super chats and super stickers, because I do want to keep doing this without like having to find a secondary job while I finish up med school. Like, some of it, of course, is selfish. I like money. I'll be honest about it. We all do. Money helps us get stuff that we like. It's not that I like money. I like the stuff that I get with money. But fundamentally, I try to explain to you why I'm asking for something like a Patreon subscription or a super chat donation. It's because it actually supports me. It actually helps me. And obviously, everything else we do supports me emotionally, which is like a win-win. Awesome. Oh my god, has it really been 2.5 hours? I expected this to be like 1 hour and 15 minutes, Chad. This is honestly insane. Guys, you can still ask me questions if you're curious about anything. Like, I guess I'm on a roll a little bit. I apologize if I'm rambling a little. I guess I'm a little excited. Just briefly want to make sure that there's no like still breaking news. Sometimes Sunday to Monday transitions are a little weird in that regard. Jamie, I actually like the Metaverse and VR a lot because I'm allergic to the sun. And well, dude, when we're talking about something that actually keeps you inside, it's just like if somebody says to me, well, I'm a cancer patient, I'm immunodeficient, like, why shouldn't I not have the option? Yeah, Of course, but most of my viewers are not allergic to the sun. Most of my viewers do not have that issue. Believe me, if you have any kind of need, special need, because of a disease, a mental problem, financial issues, then you are excluded from many of the points that I'm mentioning. I'm not a judgmental person, which means and as somebody in the medical field, of course I understand how much, like, you have sun allergy. Some people have literally crippling anxiety. Now, with a crippling anxiety, I can still tell a person to try to go out, to make some, like, basically a confrontational therapy. But when it comes to you, I would probably recommend you go out in the dark to, like, party around with friends at a later time. But yes, if you of course want to interact a lot with people throughout your regular day, there's the Metaverse, of course. That isn't a problem at all. I'm just checking 95 Mac as well. Yep. Still everything on the same as it was. The Verge. I guys, the reason why I'm by the way looking up, it's not that I'm lazy and trying to find topics. I'm actually, like, really curious about, like, Tensor G3, like, comprehensive test on the Pixel 8 Pro. This is, like, the one thing that I could find in myself the energy to talk about longer. But I guess it probably nothing until Monday will, like, come out. We have, like, some Antutu benchmarks. We have, like, one heat test that isn't very comprehensive, and then everything else is just, like, the older test that I've already shown you guys. So let me just briefly check on YouTube. MKBHD, if he has something new. Can you trust Google? To a degree, I guess. And Mr. Who's the Boss. Yeah, nobody has, like, we always talk about, like, Techtober and how much supposedly, like, tech content we're getting there, but after the iPhone reviews are, like, over and stuff like that, no, yeah, like, it's, and the Apple Watch reviews are over. Like, I guess that leaves mostly the Pixel. Like, what else are we getting actually in October that is that interesting? Like, sometimes we got, like, new processors during that period of time. I don't think that will actually be true this year. So yeah, I actually don't think that we'll have as jam-packed of a Techtober as we usually do. Jamie Abraham, why can't Android phones like Samsung phones get up to 7 years of updates? They are usually very reliant on the general drivers that are provided by Qualcomm. And Qualcomm does not provide drivers for that long for the latest operating system version. So they would be able to do that with highly custom chips, or at least semi-custom chips, I guess, with what Google has done, where they're like writing the drivers themselves. And I guess Samsung would be able to, for example, do that for their Exynos chips. But again, it's sort of also a choice, right? To actually support something for that long costs money, costs resources, and if you promised it up front, then you might end up having to break your promise, which could result in, like, class action lawsuits. This is why companies will go a little below that. Like, Samsung now promises 4 years, right? I believe. And I guess they could go above that if they really wanted to, but they will not promise that, well, unless, like, the market forces them, because Google is now doing it. But they will not really be super aggressive about promising something where they might potentially have to go back on that promise. Once I heard the Samsung Foundry worked on the Tensor chip. Yeah, the Tensor chip is manufactured by Samsung. The Tensor G3 is manufactured on Samsung's 4nm LPP, which is low power plus. But then there is LPP plus, right, where the third P instead of a P is actually a plus sign, and that will be happening for the Exynos 2400 next year, and the Tensor G4 before then the Tensor G5 will move over to TSMC 3 nanometer, unless Samsung gets like really aggressive with their 3 nanometer GAAFET mode. At that point we might actually see once again decent competition between Samsung and TSMC, which after 7 nanometer, man, 7 nanometer was like such a blow to everyone else in the industry. Like Intel was like completely left behind with their 14 nanometer and then their 10 nanometer designs. Samsung had like their older nodes, and then they switched to 8 nanometer, which wasn't often even as good as TSMC's 10 nanometer was. So yeah, it's really crazy just how much ahead TSMC currently is. I guess our only chance is that because TSMC is still on FinFET, while Samsung will be going to GAAFET already on 3 nanometer, something that TSMC will only be doing for 2 nanometer in like 2026 probably. So we might see like decent competition in the year 2025-ish, I guess. This is when probably like Samsung's 3 nanometer yields will actually be good enough. And then we'll see how like N3P from TSMC compares to like 3 nanometer GAAFET from Samsung. So that's a lot of numbers, a lot of letters. I think everything I said is technically correct, but yeah, I can see why you would doubt them. Like this is why I really want to see those results, because the X3, like the main core, right, is the same between the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 for Samsung, right, which is just a little overclocked. And it's the same main core as in the Tensor G3, but the Tensor G3 has by far the lowest clock speeds as far as I understand, which means that it's like abysmal in single core in comparison to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, even though they literally have the same main core. So you have to understand that there really is some weirdness going on with that chip, and it really might all come down to it being manufactured by Samsung. Jamie, 2025 will be a competitive year. Qualcomm with Nuvia. Bro, I don't know why I'm saying bro, by the way. I don't know when Nuvia is actually happening. Like, we've had so many promises from Qualcomm in that regard, and like I'm looking forward to it. I hope it does more stuff. But yeah, like Tensor G5 will be on TSMC, right? It probably will be on N3E or N3P. Depends on how much allocation they actually get. And the fully custom Exynos, I guess we wouldn't have the 2500 then, or would it? No, yeah, I guess it's true, right? We're getting the 2400 next year and then the 2500 afterwards. Yeah, 2025 could be a really competitive year. That's true. Even if half of those plans like work out, right, we still have like AMD coming at that point with like Zen 6. We have a PlayStation 5 at late 2024 that will be like RDNA 3.5/RDNA 4, which will be interesting. Like late 2024 to like early 2025 is when we might see like the RTX 5000 series from Nvidia. So there's a lot like that will be interesting. And with that, I guess I'll just finish up, unless anybody has like any urgent questions anymore, because it is getting a little long, and I don't want to lose my voice fully before tomorrow. Thank you guys so much for your extensive input. Thank you for making this stream really a lot of fun for me, really like distracting me from all the crap happening in the world. I guess I'll finish the video how I've often paused it, which is to remind you to like, subscribe, share, do all the YouTube jazz as I call it, and consider supporting me directly through either Patreon. You'll find the link to that in the description of this channel. If you're live in a live stream, you can send me a super chat or a super sticker, and if the video has already been like processed by YouTube post live stream, then you can send me a super thanks, which I suppose does pretty much the same thing. thing. I'm not an expert in this. I've only been monetized for like 2 weeks, but we'll figure it out together, I guess. Jamie, Exynos 2400 is being referred to as Samsung's dream chip. Yeah, but you have to understand that Samsung has also been like really wobbly with how much money they have been putting into their Exynos designs. It does not seem like they have a fully comprehensive, like Apple's A series team on this anymore as they had in the past, because they really at some point believed, okay, good, if Qualcomm is so much better, we'll just use their chips, and then we have also like MediaTek to choose from for like cheaper chips and stuff like that. I understand. I've heard that they have like a really custom architecture for like their own custom stuff, similar to what Apple is doing. While currently like Samsung's chip, like the Exynos 2400, will, in terms of cores that it actually uses, will not be that dissimilar to like the upcoming Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, right? I guess I can just briefly open this up for you guys. GSMarina.com. I think they've talked about recently about the Snapdragon, the Qualcomm, the Exynos 2400. Yeah, you guys can feel that it's getting late in the day, right? For me. Because yeah, the Exynos 2400 detailed, right? So you can open it up for yourself. So they're promising a 1.7 times increase in CPU performance, which that is the result of the 2200 being like an ass chip by all accounts. Like if we go to like Geekbench, I don't even know if they talk about single core or multi-core. They don't say. And the 14.7x boost in AI performance, again, the 2200 definitely did not have like the best neural engine at that point. It has an Eclipse 940 GPU based on RDNA 3. Sounds actually interesting, and it will be fabbed on Samsung's 4nm LPP Plus. So that's the node that was rumored for the Tensor G3, but it will not come to that. And it has a main X4 core, not an X3, which is what we find in the current generation of like Tensor and Snapdragons. And then we have like a really weird setup. We have like 2 Cortex A720 cores clocked at 3.1 gigahertz. Then we have an additional the Cortex X4 will be clocked at 3.1 gigahertz. Then 2 Cortex A720 cores will be clocked at 2.9 gigahertz. And then there will be 3 the same Cortex A720 cores, but instead of 2.9 gigahertz, they would now be clocked at 2.6. Right, so you would have 5 of the same cores, but just with different top peak frequencies. Maybe the lesser clocked ones could also get a little less cache. I don't know how customizable the designs are from ARM. And then there are 4 Cortex A520 cores at 1.8 gigahertz. So we now would actually have 10 cores inside it, and we have technically 3 different core types, but then one of those core types has different subsets at different frequencies, so it's really weird. MediaTek Dimensity 9300 CPU core configuration is very interesting. Is it new? Dimensity 9300. I cannot find it. Has it not been outlined? Is it a rumor? Oh, it's new. Oh, it's a 12 core. Wait, what? Oh, it's a 12 core GPU. That's interesting. Oh, it's actually new stuff. That's interesting. Maybe I'll add it to like a processor comparison, right? Once we have like Tensor G3 benchmarks, I would actually like to like look into all the chips that we have and that we are likely to get. I think that could make a good video. Tipster claims that, oh, okay, it's a tipster. Okay, it's not fully official. The Dimensity 9300 outperforms Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 with its superior CPU configuration, but that might compromise power efficiency. So it has 3.25 gigahertz. It will have Cortex X4. Cortex X4 will be the main chip across the latest Exynos next year, across the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, and across the Dimensity 9300. But then it will have a 1 plus 3 plus 4 clusters. Wait, what are the 3 cores? Well, no, it's pretty similar actually. It's like a 3 wait, what? Plus 3 X4s? What? Oh, interesting. Now I know why you're calling it fascinating. Yeah, you're right. It would have 3 X4 cores. Like, so it would have 4 performance cores. Wow, but that would be really hard to cool at anything close to max frequency. Man, that is a risky thing. I have a hard time believing that because of just how large the X cores are, right? The X cores are gigantic. They're like bigger than like the efficiency cores combined often. So having 4 of them, like could they have like a special X4 design, maybe with like a little less cache? Because if you go with like lower frequencies, you usually also don't need as much cache. And then they have 12 cores of Immortalis G720 GPU. So yeah, we definitely will have a lot more to talk about. And thank you, Jamie. I'll actually like bookmark that so that I don't forget it. At bookmark. That's really nice of you. Thank you, thank you. I really appreciate the input. But now we are at an end. I will not let this become an over 3-hour podcast. But thank you guys so much for all your contributions. I've already said all my niceties that I could before, but I guess I can only add to it because now you guys aren't just helping me with my current stream, but also with like upcoming streams to prepare for it. And I can also only say, again, thank you so much. This channel has grown tremendously. I really hope to get this growth not for like the raw subscriber count number, but specifically so that we always have a decent amount of people watching. I've already outlined all the YouTube jazz, from like subscribing, liking, sharing, that you can do for me, for supporting me directly, either Patreon, Super Chat, Super Stickers, Super Thanks. Try to tell you that. I know I'm a small channel. I know I have to earn your trust to actually get money, but I'll hope we'll have a relationship like that. But again, I really just appreciate the views. I really just appreciate the likes. It's amazing to have people watch me, to listen to me rambling, to listen. Some people ask me for like life advice now on like Twitter DMs because they like some kind of rant that I did during a stream. It's amazing, and I don't even think that highly of myself. I just try to ramble off some like something that I consider common sense, I guess. Bye to you guys. Thank you again so much. See you next time. I'll try to inform you when it's actually happening, but please hit the notification bell so you will notice it, even if you don't follow me on Twitter, for example. I'll hope to be at least back once there are benchmarks comprehensively for the new Pixel 8 devices, but if there's big Apple news, of course I'll also react to that. Next week is still pretty free for me, so I'll hope we can do some streams there together. I hope that I can make maybe some smaller videos because those perform for some reason really well on the channel. But beyond all of that, thank you guys so much. It's been such an incredible journey for me. See you next time. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.